running a few minutes behind. Just, we're waiting on Peter and Nick. As soon as they get here, we can start the meeting.
Good afternoon, all. I just want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for your continued involvement in this effort. We greatly appreciate it, and I know we've got a lot of material to cover today, and I know I can count on it, I can bank on it, a lot of good input from all of you, so that's a given. So we're looking forward to it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jose and the team so that we can get started. Please be sure to help yourself to some food. Certainly, if you've got to take any calls or handle any business, you can certainly step outside. And with that, let's go ahead and get started, make the most effective use of the time. So thanks all.
All right, well, thanks everyone. We know that you were very excited about this meeting. The purpose for today's meeting is that Jordan and team will be presenting the progress they have made on the building of the model, also in the assumptions and the data inputs that they have incorporated. We know that many of you have offered help to provide more information on data inputs and assumptions, so that's something that we want to encourage. If you have some information that you want to share now or later, please do so that Jordan can assess and see how he can incorporate that into the model. Something else, something more that we will be achieving today, Jordan will be presenting results from the existing baseline. That'll give us an idea of potential outputs for the model they are working on right now, and we will be able to discuss how we can transform that into something that this committee can use. This meeting will run longer than usual. We have 3 hours, so just to let you know on that, and we count with your participation. Process-wise, we are in the last column here in the model execution. We are not closing anything. This is just to share updates, to share progress. There is more work to do. Jordan will get into the details. So we are in that first bullet on the right end, into the model development and validation. So having said that, Jordan prepared some slides to share those updates to you. So I will pass it over to you, Jordan.
All right, thanks everyone. This has been fun for me. I was telling everyone here that I was up till about 1 in the morning putting this all together, and I started at 8 o'clock last night and just didn't get out of my chair. I was enjoying it so much and realized, oh, I got to get to bed before I drive down here, right? And it's just, this is the type of work I really enjoy, and so thank you again for expressing the confidence in me and being able to do this work for you. I did want to introduce Amin. He is from Hazen & Sawyer. Tim Osting is online today. He's not here in the room, but he's listening. And so, that's where we are. My team is hard at work doing more of the updates that I'm going to give you an introduction to today as we speak. They're working on the various, putting in all of the things that are needed to do the 4 modifications that we talked about. We were working closely with DSI on modification number 2, and I'll talk about that. And they've given a lot of great suggestions of how we can further improve the model on top of some of these modifications that we've been talking about. So I'm going to show you, we're going to go through the various modifications and give you an update of the progress I'm on. But the first thing I wanted to do was show you something new that I hadn't seen until recently. This was results from GHD. And not a full suite of results, I gotta say that. I don't have GHD's model. I only have a certain amount of their output. And so I can't tell you with any certainty what they use to generate this output. But I'm gonna just show you what it is, and I'm gonna compare it. I'm gonna compare their results to the results that we got from the baseline model that I created for the port a couple years ago. Just showing you how the 2 model result data sets compare more or less. Yes? That was the previous contractor that was hired to do the modeling effort. Yes, that's what I understand. I don't know what GHD stands for, but
they were working for Kiewit, right? And then their efforts never got to conclusion because the contract was terminated.
All right, so let's see if I can advance slides here. I can, great. Okay, so this is a graphic that was created by GHD or Kiewit, or whoever it was. This was provided to me and I added the things in red. So what you're seeing here is their model grid of the Inner Harbor. And a couple things to note. So they have 10 grid cells going across the width of the Inner Harbor. So those are roughly 35 to 40 meters in width, each of those grid cells. The grid cells appear to be, and I don't know this for sure, I'm just basing it off the scale, they appear to be about 100 meters in length. I have absolutely no idea what their vertical extent was. That was not documented in anything. So that's the basic size of the grids, and I should point out that modification number 1 that we're doing on our modeling of the Inner Harbor is to increase the grid resolution above what you'll see later in this presentation. But I was planning on putting 9 or 10 grid cells across the width, just like Kiewit did, and maybe making the horizontal size, if not similar, a little bit bigger, maybe even a little bit smaller in certain areas. I'll probably nest it a little bit to get a better horizontal resolution. And then our vertical resolution will be changing that as well, and I've got a discussion on that. So I wanted you to see that model. This is what it looks like. They've provided results at those 3 starred locations. So at what I've labeled as the bay entrance, then the intake location, and the discharge location. And just with that setting, let me show you their results. So we're going to look at their modeled results for the bay entrance first. We're going to start at the bay entrance and work our way, what I like to think of as upstream into the Inner Harbor.
Jordan, did they have the water going from the channel into Nueces Bay via the power plant?
I have no idea. Yeah. They provided 0 documentation on whatever they modeled.
Could you please turn on the mic? Carl, please, sorry for interrupting.
They've got a large grid out in Nueces Bay on this slide, so I would assume that they did something out there.
Well, I think that grid is just their distance markers on the graphic. I don't think that's the computational grid. Yes, inside the Inner Harbor. They're rectangular, really, but yeah. Yep, those are their grid cells. Okay. Move forward. So here is a plot that I created of their data. They provided their data as a time series in Excel. I think they output data every 15 minutes, I think, and they did this for the entire year. They modeled the entire year of 2024. Okay? So what you're seeing here, and they output the data strangely, at least in the Excel. They said they have a surface layer, that's what's shown in blue, right? So blue is the surface. Then they had one that they labeled as a 10 feet depth, so that's the green. And then they said bottom 20 feet depth, which of course we know the bottom in the Inner Harbor is not 20 feet. So I don't know which is true, whether it's the bottom or whether it's 20 feet. But I label it as 20 feet on this graphic. Ship channel C is 50.
Probably 20 feet above the bottom.
It could be.
That's the approximate intake and discharge elevations.
Okay, well, we'll go with that thought then. All right, so that's roughly 30 feet depth then. Okay, so let's take a look at what this particular at the mouth of the bay is suggesting is happening in 2024. This is, again, modeled results. We have no idea if this compared at all with any measured results that GHD or Freeze or whoever has. They didn't present any of that information. So if you look, I mean, there's a lot of things that strike me right away. You can see that the salinity ranged from 38 parts per thousand down to 32.5, right? So it's not a large salinity range over this year. It does vary, over the course of the year. You can see evidence of freshwater inflow events. I think that's what's happening in early July. It looks like you had essentially a large stratification there between the surface that got fresher at 33 parts per thousand versus the bottom that was 37 parts per thousand. So that seems to me that there had to be something driving down the salinity in the surface layers, and that's generally a freshwater influx of some way. So my guess is we've had pretty good rain at that time, and that did eventually cause the bottom salinity to go down. You can see it sort of in July 10th or so. You see all the red lines are starting to go further down on the graph. So I think you had some decent rain events in there that disrupted some salinity stratification. You can see stratification occurred in January and in February, and then there's that period from mid-February to mid-March where there really wasn't any vertical stratification at all. We were getting roughly the same salinity from all three of these locations, which I found interesting. And you see a similar thing from September all the way through mid-December even. You see some stratification, but not quite a huge amount. Especially in late November, you can see that the salinity that was measured, the green and the red, they're pretty much on top of each other, meaning that there wasn't, increasing salinity stratification as you go deeper. It seemed decently mixed, although it's a little bit offset from the surface stratification. So that's at the bay mouth, right? And that's going to feel the influence of hydrodynamic processes that are working in the bay itself. And it's also going to feel any of the impacts of flows in and out of the inner harbor. Any questions on any of that before I move on to the next one?
There, just, do I think I'm seeing the impacts of tides with the little cycles that's the daily tidal flow?
I would believe so, yeah. And you'll see that in the results that I'll present from the EFDC plus modeling too, seeing that variation.
So I'm just looking, we had a tropical storm that gave us 4 inches in late June and a severe thunderstorm that gave us 12 inches in late July.
No, seems consistent. Good.
So I was
I know
curious,
what I'm talking about.
it doesn't show like ambient salinity, like as if there wasn't desalination going on. I'm assuming maybe surface would be really close, but we don't know like how much the surface salinity is affected by desalination. Do you know if there was any kind of like ambient data?
Well, this is the modeled ambient conditions, I believe. I don't believe that this is results from any desalination simulation that they did. I have no evidence one way or the other, but I don't know that for sure. I think they're just providing us with their modeled ambient salinity. Yes.
A couple of things. So you had no discussion with them about this to understand the input conditions and the boundary conditions?
I have not, no.
They wouldn't answer my questions either at the council meeting, and they whisked their guy off. So I guess I'm bringing this up because, we don't know what they were doing here. And if you look at that mesh, there's no way they were modeling going into Nueces Bay because there's no mesh continuing over there. Without that 335 MGD huge flow, which I don't know the numbers, maybe somebody else does here from the interaction with the bay, but we essentially have a dead leg without that input, or that major flow from the power plant. So to me, all your modeling here is likely just the tidal interaction and some inflows from fresh water, but it's not really characteristic, I think, of, without considering the power plant flow. I think that's the dominant flow. So without the ability to ask them questions, and my next question to you was, I never considered the questions I asked intellectual property, because these equations and finite difference, finite element modeling has been around a long time. So I'm not sure why they thought it was proprietary to even give us the conditions, the boundary conditions, the initial conditions, so we could know what we're looking at. So I think it's pretty hard to compare when you're going to have a model complete with those flows the way they're supposed to be. So I don't know that I'll just say I don't know there's a whole lot of value when we don't understand what we're looking at here.
Yeah, if I could comment, I think you're exactly right. The intention, we shouldn't compare the two because they're going to be different. And then just to remind everyone, the GHD work was stopped right? So they, obviously, they stopped working and,
Well, they
You know.
did comment about doing gazillions of iterations. And the technical person, I think they're understood, but I just want to say that we really appreciate openness. And I don't see a reason why we shouldn't be exposed to anything other than a proprietary solver.
well, so quick question, does this provide any value to us?
It does in a second. I'll show you.
Okay, we'll let you keep going.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a reason I wanted to look at this and present it here today.
Okay.
And part of it, I'll get to that later on, yeah. And this is in no way well, I don't know the people at GHD, I don't know how they did this, but it looks like reasonable model results if I could guess how they built their model. Without their documentation, again, I can't say very much, as you point out. My suspicion is in their model that they were modeling the Nueces Bay thing as just as a removal of the water at that location. They didn't need to have it discharge into the bay and simulate that. So I think they were modeling the physics related to the removal of that water and the momentum flux that were in it. But again, I don't know that for sure, right? Yes?
Yes, just so I, wow. So I fully understand, this model is not including discharge from the desal. This is just background, natural salinity, that you, as far as we know, right?
That's my guess, but again, it's just a guess. I don't know what they actually modeled.
Sure.
They didn't document it at all.
So my question is, in terms of the value of this information, I don't see any actual salinity measurements to compare with their model outputs. So how can we actually know that this is worth anything?
We can't. Certainly not as I presented it here.
Okay.
There is a salinity monitoring station relatively nearby, so I could overlay that data from that onto this plot. I just didn't get to it last night.
Okay.
That's actually a good point. So I'll make a point to check that, see if it's way off or not.
My understanding is that this does include theirs, and the reason we don't have documentation is because people in this room advocated for their contract to be terminated before it was completed, and it is why others of us in this room have advocated for us to pay for the city to re-engage them so they can finish their report, so everybody can read it and understand it, and for them to be available for you to understand it. And so I just want to lay that down there, that, yeah, there was political targeting of scientific analysis. These guys gave a council presentation that had the wrong political answer for others in this room, and they advocated and succeeded in terminating the project. So that's why we don't have the answers, because people who are acting like this is not useful data specifically went in and advocated to the council that we not get a final report on it. So, thanks.
Okay. So this is at the bay mouth, moving up to the intake location. Really what I'm going to show you is this is the same set of data. You can see it's on the same vertical scale. This has a lower range in salinity over the course of the year. There's less stratification. You can still see the effects of that freshwater inflow event. You know, there's not that much to say, as we just pointed out, that we don't have all the background about this, but I wanted to present it there, and then we'll just move fast and see, okay, now we're at the diffuser, right? Now we see a different change in their model. We're getting 3 parts per thousand stratification between that bottom layer, or 20 feet above the bottom, and the 10 feet and surface, right? Not much difference between the surface and the 10 feet, but 3 parts per thousand difference almost uniformly across the entire year. And that was strange to me. And so that's my biggest question with looking at the modeling that they put forward. What was driving that stratification in their model? I don't know. And so I wanted to see if the model that we have reproduces this. And of course I can't do that because the model that we have is set to run at 2010, 2011, not 2024 conditions yet. You know, so maybe we'll get 2024 data if it's enough available to run this model, and we'll be able to do this comparison to see. So putting all of these together, right? Here are the three graphs from the GHD results, all on the same vertical scale, same horizontal scale. And what you can see is the difference between the different locations. And I believe that those different locations, their relative answers are what I would expect in terms of how the system would likely behave. I'm still scratching my head about the diffuser location and why you get that almost uniformly 3 parts per thousand. That seems suspicious. It seems like maybe they built that in at the beginning of the model and then tried to see if it would dissipate throughout the model run. But again, I'm speculating 100% here because we just don't have any documentation on it. All right, now let me get you to why I showed you all of this stuff. All right, so here is a comparison at the intake location. And so the top graph is the GHD data from 2024. All right, so you've already seen that. The bottom graph is the EFDC plus model data from 2010 to 2011. And this is the model that was created for the port study in 2023. Doesn't have any of the modifications that we've done. It doesn't have the additional inner harbor discharges that Amin and his group has put into the model. So this is just a comparison, and again, we're comparing different years, different environmental forcings, different solar radiation, all sorts of different things going on in 2024 versus 2010 and 2011. But I want to point out the differences also in the model. If we look at the GHD modeling results on the top, you can see that a lot of the salinity is calculated to range between 36 and 33. But as you look at the other modeled salinity that we've got from 2010 and 2011, we've got a much greater range of salinity. So there's a difference right there in how each model calculates what's going on at these intake locations. And we see a greater dynamic of change in the EFDC plus model. Now again, can't make too many conclusions based on this because we're comparing different years and different modeling results, but just the magnitudes of the difference I thought was interesting and worth talking about, or worth presenting at least. So thoughts, questions before I move to the next thing?
I have a question for staff. His staff, to David's things he said, does the staff know the answer to that question about GHD's model? Do you know, Peter, Nick, anybody? This council was ever told that this is with or without discharge from the Inner Harbor plant? Because for a citizen to know more than the council knows, I'm a little surprised, honestly.
Well, yeah, thank you for that, Aaron. I think it's important to, I mean, Jordan is just taking some of the information he has to show it to you for a comparison purpose that we haven't even allowed him to get to yet. I'm not going to comment on what the data does or doesn't include with any background information. If you look at all these charts, I mean, you could throw a million charts out and on the spot, I can't say what was or wasn't included. In my opinion, it's important to let Jordan keep working through his presentation and get to the point that he wants to make. But I do want to reiterate, I mean, the GHD work, the direction was to stop work, and that's what they did. That's why there's no report.
I don't know anybody that would do a presentation like they gave in front of the public, showed data, showed results, and wouldn't answer questions, not give what was done in the work they had done to that point. If I paid for the work to that point, you definitely, while maybe they wanted to do more, but I'll just say that you were due under contract for them to answer those questions to know what it was that they presented. And I don't want to continue the debate. I'm just saying as a matter of practice in doing R&D work, when you do a presentation on work you've done, you complete the answers from the public or whoever the audience is But I'd say we don't know enough here to really spend a whole lot of time. I appreciate some of this comparison, but I'd suggest too that we move on to your work.
Okay. And Jordan, you validated your results on there. Where was the closest validation point?
Yeah, there is a validation point that I used that wasn't in the Inner Harbor, but was relatively close to the mouth of the Inner Harbor, but yet in Corpus Christi Bay, a little bit to the south and east. So there was a salinity point there that I used for validation,
Okay, so we're looking at a validated model versus an unvalidated model.
as far as we can tell.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Jordan, I have a question about the actual data for 2010 and 2011, just to understand it. So here we're looking at salinity gradients, right? So in 2010, there are some occasions where you really do have somewhat of a 2 to 3 part per thousand difference, maybe a little bit more between the surface and the bottom at the intake site.
Yes, that's right.
You don't see that as much in 2010. What was different between these 2 years where you do have a salinity gradient? And I think we shouldn't be calling it stratification, because technically it's not stratification, it's salinity, right? If we were looking at density, then we could really talk about stratification.
Well, stratification is just a difference in density in the vertical direction.
Exactly, but not in salinity. So this is just a salinity gradient, which would
Okay.
drive the stratification,
That's true.
right? So, but what happened, like, what was the difference between these 2 years where you do have 1 year where you do have more of a salinity gradient compared to the other?
So 2010, it had quite a large freshwater inflow events in the end of September, October. So that drove a lot of the change that you see on the graphic there. There wasn't very much inflow at all in 2011. Temperatures were higher. That's why by the summer and toward the end of the year, you got a steady increase in salinity at all depths, just because you didn't have that freshwater influx. Those are the main differences here. There was some differences in the tidal forcing as well, but that's, I think, less significant in this location.
And the discharge salinity was fixed, right? So
Yeah.
when the ambient salinity is lower, it's going to have a bigger impact. And when the ambient salinity is higher, it won't be as much of a difference.
Right, but even in this simulation that we're showing, there was no modeled discharge. We didn't model a discharge in this one. Yeah, this is just ambient calculations. It does have discharges for the other entities in the Inner Harbor, not all of them, but some of them, but not the planned Inner Harbor desal discharge.
Just excuse me if I'm mistaken, but what we're looking at here is model data, or is this actual salinity data from those years?
This is model data.
This is all model data.
Yes.
And in 2010, 2011, this is when this was dry years, and you were doing this for the whole Bay system at the time?
Yes, it's the whole Bay system, but 2010 was what I consider to be more of a wet year.
Okay. And this, when you call intake, what was that location? This would be where the Inner Harbor intake would be?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm not a modeler, so just gonna preface that, but is there any chance that the stronger gradients that you see in 2010 and then they just pretty much disappear by 2011 in terms of the vertical, could that have anything to do with model stability? So in other words, you're starting it in early 2010. Does it take the model a while to kind of stabilize? Do you know, I don't even know if I'm using the right term there, but
Yeah, you absolutely are. I mean, this is a concept in modeling called the model spin-up, right? You run the model for a certain period of time. You start it with initial conditions that are just pure guesses. And then you let the mathematics of the model work its way through over some iterations, and eventually you get to a point where you actually start to believe the validity of the results. And so what I'm showing is 2010 through 2011. The model starts on November 1st of 2009. And so we have a whole 2 months of spin-up time there that I ignore because I don't believe those results, but I thought the 2-month period looked enough spin-up to get reasonable.
so is that something then that you might test or play around with when you go to do the modeling for this effort? Like maybe having a longer spin-up time or something? I mean,
It's one of the things you've asked us to do. So yeah, it's definitely something we can add in there and consider.
I have a quick question. We're looking at this data, but did the GHD provide any written reports that go along with this the data?
No, this was Excel spreadsheets.
Okay.
So Jordan, if, I think I heard you say that a potential primary driver of the variation through 2011 is the drought.
Yes.
That can make a difference of 8 parts just because of a lack of inflow, fresh inflow.
Lack of fresh inflow, but also these were high temperatures at that portion of the year, the end of the year, consistently high temperatures. So a lot of evaporative loss that was concentrating salinity in the bay system.
Yeah, we had a real high November and December in 2024 also.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification to Deanna, this is not GHD, is it?
The top graphic is GHG data.
Okay, the top one is, all right.
The bottom one is from EFDC. I should have labeled that, but yeah. Okay, let's move on from that comparison. All right, now we're going to get into discussing the individual modifications 1 through 4, and I've presented them in order. The first modification that we proposed was, of course, modifying the grid resolution in the inner harbor. And so what I'm showing you on this graphic is the grid cells in red are the cells in the original model. And the first thing that I wanted to show you with this is it looks like the grid is offset from the aerial photo that's behind it. Now there's a reason for that. The grid was built 2 years ago. The aerial photo and the system that overlays the two was built just this past year, so it's a different projection slightly than what was used. One of the things that I would love to do is rectify this grid with the aerial photo so you can make better looking display graphics, right? It looks cooler when you've got the real background behind it. And so we investigated over this last week whether we could easily and efficiently modify the grid so it better matches the background. And we came up with an alternative grid I'll show you in a second that does, in some places, better match the background. I would argue, and I'll show you further in this argument, and I want this to be a point of discussion here, I don't think we in any way need to modify the shape of this grid and the other extent of it to match the aerial photo background. I think we clearly have a valid representation of the Corpus Christi Bay system, and the fact that it doesn't perfectly match the aerial image behind it, I think is immaterial. But recognizing the value from I won't call it a PR standpoint, it just would look cooler if it did mash up, right? There's no question about it. So this is the grid as it exists now. This is the grid that I propose that we're going to modify to increase the resolution. And so you can see, if you look right at the mouth of the inner harbor, you can see clearly we've got 3 grid cells expanding the width of the inner harbor, and that carries all the way forward up through the inner harbor. We're going to expand that to at least 9 grid cells, maybe more, and we're going to chop those grid cells lengthwise, probably into thirds at least, possibly more. And again, we're going to do that in different gradations at different locations, I think. Probably between, I'll get to that in a second. This is the original model, and now I can't switch it. Okay, so here is the potential revised grid that we created. You can see it matches better around the inner harbor, the width of it, around Oasis Bay. It's more of a stair-stepped model on the edges of North Shore right there. It's a good representation, no question about it. But it looks good here. It doesn't look good in other places of the Bay system. And this is the trade-off that you always have in modeling. I'm going to preface all of this with, we build the models to show the best results in our area of interest. And so when we built the model in 2023 for the port, we focused on the areas they were most interested in, which is the La Quinta Channel area, all right? So here's the potential revised grid. This is the same revised grid, but looking further toward the Gulfs. And so you can see We've got a good representation of the Corpus Christi ship channel going out to the Gulf. We've got a great representation of the Aransas channel, right? We have zero representation of the La Quinta channel, and we don't have any representation of the GIWW. Those were more of the focus of the ports model, so I built them in that original grid. I don't think grid modifications are going to make all that much difference in the results. We're going to do the refinement in the Inner Harbor. I think that'll have some impact. I don't think it's worth switching to this newer grid in order to get some sort of better semblance of a match just with the aerial background. So my proposition is to not switch to this new grid. This is the old grid, right? This is the grid representation showing the bathymetry that's in the current model. You can see we clearly have the La Quinta channel. The green color is a 15-meter depth. So you can see the La Quinta channel, you see the main Corpus Christi channel, the Inner Harbor. If you look at the Aransas channel representation in this old model, it's a stair-steppy thing, which is not great, but that's the only thing I could get to work in that location in this grid. So, but I wasn't worried about it because we weren't focused on that area. You can see the deeper portion of the GIWW going through the whole bay system. That was important to me to get that right. So again, I think we're going to go with this grid system, refine this. The refining will add grid cells to the Inner Harbor as well as Nueces Bay. That's just required based on the way the model works. We have new bathymetry data that we're going to add to this model. I'll show that in a second. When you do grid refinement, you need to, it's not any good if you don't have better bathymetry data to make the grid more useful, right, and more representative. So that's why we're going to go in and use the new bathymetry to match things up and make it look better. Yes.
So we're looking at depth. Is that the color contours here?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, the darker color is deeper.
So when you increase the number of cells in the ship channel, that goes throughout the whole ship channel all the way out to the ocean, right?
No, it doesn't have
Okay.
to. No, we're only going to refine it in the Inner Harbor itself. The rest of the ship channel we can leave as it is.
Okay, so when you go from 3 wide to 9 wide, that doesn't carry out through the...
We may have to stagger it just a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, that sounds good to me.
It'll be, that's part of the trick of it, is getting something that works and makes the model still stable mathematically. And what I mean by stable is when you run it, it doesn't throw out a mathematical error in it.
What did you use for cut A and cut B of the ship channel? You said you weren't gonna change it. Well, the ship channel changed.
Which ship channel?
The ship channel
Okay.
that goes, the cut A and cut B of the ship channel, deeper and wider. There's a new profile out there.
Well, then we'll use
It's all
it.
been dredged.
We can use,
The
we
ship
should
channel
use
is-
the new
is
bathymetry
deeper
then.
than it used to be. You have to use a new ship channel.
Okay.
What year was this?
I mean, there's the one I created in 2023 where I got the source bathymetry. I don't even remember at that time. So
If you were probably, well, hard to say, Jeff might have some insight there, but you need to have the ship channel project complete when you model this.
There have been updates.
Okay.
So, I mean, so bathymetry is different.
okay.
I think at the time of when you created your mesh, I don't know if there was anything that it was at 54 feet. So.
No, I don't think so.
Right, and now the entire primary channel is at 54.
Okay.
With extra width, so there is an update there, for
All
sure.
right. Well
And
then,
there are barge shelves out there too. There's a much bigger cross-sectional area to the ship channel.
This is something I kind of wanted to ask about because we're doing historical conditions, right? So if the ship channel didn't get modified until mid-2020s, would that throw off our validation if we're looking at 2010 and 2011, that kind of stuff?
Well, you need to use actual data to calibrate, but then when we want to look forward, we've got to use actual ship channel.
Right. because we're mostly looking before the updated ship channel, right?
Only for the calibration. If we're trying to see how this discharge is going to behave in the inner harbor, we want the system as it is now. So definitely. And great, if we need to refine the width and model of the ship channel, let's do it.
Yeah,
Right.
so look,
No
as
question.
with the vessel data, as soon as you're ready, we just need to hear from you, we'll get you the updated imagery.
Perfect.
Yeah, Corps of Engineers got that all.
I just want to point out something really quick. Every time that you make a significant change like this in a model, technically you need to recalibrate the model because it's not the same model. And then there is no end to this, right? Because every time there is a new thing, there is a new, channel or whatever. So we need to make a strategic decision about like how we want to up to 1 year, let's say 2010 to 2018, 19, or 2020. We're going to use one model, and then after that, we're going to use a complete different model. But we need to realize that these two models are not the same models.
So I'm going to contradict what Amin said. He said there's no end to it. That's not true. The end to this project is April 28th and then June 30th, right? There's the end. We are not going to be able to do everything that is needed in that time frame. This model is calibrated. It's good. Is it perfect? No. We're going to make it better, and we're not going to worry as much as we would from a scientific publishing in peer-reviewed journals type thing to get everything right. We're not going to do that. That's not what our objective here. So we're going to make this good as possible to simulate the conditions that we expect the brine discharge is going to have from this inner harbor desal plant. And we're not going to worry about whether it matches 2010, 2011, because that's already been done with this model.
Jordan, can I ask a question? Are we studying that Aransas channel too? Is it?
No.
Right, okay. What, are you just showing it on this map here? You're showing it here, or?
Oh, I mean, it's here because it's part of the system, right?
Okay.
It's going to be in the model. We'll have, the model's going to show some flow going through it, but I have no knowledge of what the actual flow is there or anything like that.
You're not studying water quality in the Aransas channel, right? I just want to make sure I'm saying the right thing. It's just the three, right? The Nueces Bay, the ship channel, and the Corpus Christi Bay?
Well, and the model domain is what you see, right? It goes up into Redfish Bay, goes down into Laguna Madre. It's all going to be simulated, but the focus is the interaction from the inner harbor and what that's going to do into Corpus Christi Bay proper. That's really the focus.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yep.
Jordan, so where is the flow, the power plant flow? How is that modeled here?
So in this particular model, we have it set up, I can't zoom in on this one, but I can show you when we actually look at the model itself. It's set up to take water out of the inner harbor. It just sort of removes it in the model and then mathematically sticks it back into Nueces Bay with the discharge flow rate that we simulate.
And you'll show us the grid structure around where that release is?
I can, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can you explain how the tides are forced in the model?
Yeah. So the tides are forced, I wish this was laser pointer would work, but if you see the light blue sort of semicircle out in the Gulf of Mexico there, that's the deepest portion of the model. It's just part of the Gulf of Mexico, and we've forced a water level elevation at that location at every time step. So we've said that this is the tidal boundary, the main tidal boundary for this model. And we have a couple other ones. We have that one. We did simulate, and you can't see it on this graphic, but the Packery Channel, there is a tidal influence there. There's a tidal influence coming in on the northern end of the bay up in Redfish Bay. There's tide data there. And then at the southern end in Laguna Madre, there's the same tidal influence. So we have, the model specifies time series input where we say we know what the water level is at those locations at all points in time over the time of the simulation. And that's the data, some of the data that Amin and his team are going to be collecting and trying to expand away from the 2010, 2011 time period to be able to model different things. So inputs to the model, that's the tidal forcing. This particular model has 2 points of freshwater inflows. It's got the Nueces River and Oso Creek, which goes into Oso Bay. It has the rainfall that falls directly onto the bay. It doesn't get any non-point source runoff that comes into the bay from rain on the land surface somewhere else. It takes wind over the entire bay system, but as set up now, it only uses one wind station. And it says the wind is uniform all across the bay, which we know is not physically true, but it's the best we could do in terms of making that assessment. Same with solar radiation and cloud cover and everything else.
Where's the wind station?
I would have to look it up. I can't tell you right now.
The reason why I'm asking is because the tides are gonna be forced through the Aransas Pass, and the winds play a huge role in tidal level in the pass.
Okay.
We see it all the time. And there is a wind station there for the National Estuarine Research Reserve with time series. There's a meteorological station with public data.
Well,
that you
great.
could
If we can use more of it. When I was building this quickly before, I think I only used, my guess now is, my recollection is I got it from the airport or the Naval Air Station.
And you have evaporation on this?
Evaporation's calculated from the solar radiation numbers, yeah. I think it applies the aerodynamic method for evaporation calculations.
So Jordan, you made a comment about the Aransas channel, and you mentioned that you used a number to drive the circulation, I guess, there, but you don't have actual measurements of the number. So I'm just curious, does that matter? Like when we think about the validity of the model, the error in the model, it sounds like you've got the model to the point where you think it simulates salinity pretty well.
I do.
But the question is, do we know why? And do we know why it's representing salinity well? Like if you're not actually, getting real data to drive the currents in some places and whatnot, is that something we should be worried about or not? I mean,
I don't think so. I mean, the reason you build a numerical model is to use the math and the physics that are inherent in the driving of water circulation with the input that we've got, right? And we have real input data for the tides and real input data for the wind. And those are the main drivers for circulation in this area. The solar radiation is the main driver for evaporation, which is the main driver for changes in salinity, as well as just freshwater inflows and mixing, right? So we know conceptually, mathematically, how to explain those processes. That's what this model does. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the model agrees with the admittedly limited availability of measured data that we have, that agreement says, hey, the model's doing pretty good.
Okay. Second question. This week there was some discussion about the agreed order, which kind of dictates how much freshwater inflow is released down the Nueces River and into Nueces Bay. And that freshwater inflow is actually very important for Nueces Bay and the Delta. So the discussion has been about just basically vacating the agreed order, right? So if that political decision were to be made to vacate the agreed order, then essentially that would change your freshwater inflow forcing into this model, which means then that we're probably not getting the model right. So has there been any discussion between you and the city about how you want to handle that scenario? I'm just curious, because that is a big kink in this effort if it happens.
Yep, so I can comment on that, and I just want to comment on it so we can move forward. There is an existing agreed order. The city hasn't made any recommendations or any intent for modifications or to vacate the agreement. We do continue to look at it as a legal document to understand it and see if we ever get to a point where we would like to make recommendations with the parties of the order. So if any of that is ever made, then we would, of course, review that with Jordan.
Okay, so just for the record, the model is being built under the assumption that you're going to continue to have those releases as part of the agreed order. And then if the agreed order is vacated, then you basically have to redo this whole modeling effort because it goes away.
Since I was heavily involved in the agreed order, I don't know what you mean by vacating it. If you vacate that agreed order, you go back to the original permit. And the original permit says, 151,000 acre feet of water per year, period. The agreed order was done to mimic Mother Nature.
Yes, I'm very well aware of that, and I appreciate that background. I'm just saying,
Just so we don't let- get it-
if you change the agreed order, if you vacate it, which is the language that was used, then that changes your input here. So it really does mess with your model output.
Right, just so we're clear, now, I wouldn't get too sidetracked on this conversation, but a Representative Denise Villalobos asked that the agreed order be vacated or be re-examined, I guess. And that letter was sent to us and Nueces River Authority and Three Rivers. But we are, before this letter came in and with prior council requests, we were in the process of getting a consultant on board to study the pros and cons of this agreed order. There is no intention of the city to vacate the agreed order. A lot of work has to be done to understand it, to understand the pros and the cons, and it won't happen anytime soon, a decision or even action. We appreciate the representative having interest in the agreed order. We know it's a well thought out. It took a lot of time to get to that point. It's not something you change overnight. So I think for the purposes of this modeling and decisions that this model will use, what we have is good. Meaning, we're going to assume the agreed order's in place.
I mean, it sounded like you're going to use all the inflow data. I mean, we're going to have a higher salinity in the model because we don't have non-point source rainfall, which is probably the second largest source of fresh water into. But if we're using recent data, Nick, when was the last time the city did an environmental release into the bay, into the Nueces? I mean, it's been years.
You know, I need to have that date because I've been asked that question recently, and we'll get it, but it's been a very long time because of the agreed order.
I mean, and
right?
my understanding of some of that conversation was that which I think is important for you, was that there was some salinity modeling that was done on that now that we have several years of real life release data, which is zero, what was presumed to happen if those releases did not happen has not happened. And so that there's clearly some dynamic that was not assessed in the modeling. You know, it could be we didn't, you know, that the widening and deepening of the ship channel increased, you know, moved flow from the southern part of the bay to the northern part of the bay. But I mean, there's lots of different things, but I mean, and I'll see if I can get whatever you know, because somebody's mentioned that to me in the last week.
Could you clarify what you mean when you say what thought was going to happen hasn't happened?
So, I mean, one of the things I heard was that, I mean, so the agreed order does not require releases when the reservoirs are under 30%. So the reservoir's been under 30% for several years. The city has not been doing releases under the agreed order. And that when the agreed order was done, there was some modeling that assumed very high levels of salinity would happen and that there would be damage to productivity. And what I heard in the last couple of weeks is people were looking at that and there has not been damage to productivity or extremely high salinity
That
levels.
is actually incorrect.
As
Nueces,
expected.
the Coastal Bend Basin Estuaries Program has a salinity monitoring station in the Delta, and the salinities are in the 50s right now. So what you heard is incorrect.
Well, and I heard productivity was not what was, the change to productivity was not what was expected. But that was my point, is like, that's something to look at, is if there was modeling done in the past that was not correct, it would be good to know for our purposes how it was not correct.
If we could just refocus ourselves, I think we answered the agreed order question, and turn it back over to Jordan. Thank you.
Works for me. I was going to say I hadn't heard of the agreed order until today, so nobody's talked to me about it.
Because it's nothing that's going to happen immediately. It's going to take months and months, maybe years to even assess. It wasn't at the direction of the city.
No.
State representative requested that we look at it, but as you can hear in this room, it's a very charged subject with pros and cons, and it's nothing you do overnight. It's going to take a long time to look at, and it's not on our work plan right now.
If I might add, just to simplify this too, I think in the time frame that we're talking about, that we don't need to consider that. Because the worst case conditions will tell us, you know, the extent of a problem and where we want to spend our time modeling. So if we assume that we have no flow, we've got current conditions that match that, none of those releases. So I would suggest not studying that, or not
Yeah,
including.
right, that's what he said. That's what
We're
he said.
operating with worst-case conditions right now.
Right, exactly. Let's move on,
It's
let's
only gonna
focus.
get better, so.
Back to the ship channel in the Aransas Pass. So I just want to make sure when you say that you have the tidal level being driven at the eastern boundary of the domain,
Yes.
what is the data source for that?
There was a Tikkun station that was available in 2010, 2011, so the data from
I
that.
think it's not online anymore,
It's not, no.
right? So I'm looking at the ports data, the CC0302 UTMSI pier, that's the ports. And there's sea level predicted, there's sea level measured, and the same location has a meteorological station. So to me, it seems that one of the things would be to look at the model predictions versus the data at that location, because that's your forcing for what is happening and with, especially with the sea level and pushing it into the bay. So I think it would be really nice to look at that as a validation.
Would you like to see
You're referencing the
that?
location at Ingleside?
Pardon?
Are you talking about the one at Ingleside?
I'm talking about the Aransas Pass.
Yeah.
Because the forcing from the tides and the wind, it's gonna partially, I mean, the tides are gonna be coming from the coast, and the winds, of course, are over the whole domain. But if you can replicate, if the model's replicating the sea level well in the Aransas Pass, it's a very good indication that the model's performing well.
So I just want to mention that as far as I know, I think starting last year, the GLO CMP program through the Special Merit Program funded CBI to bring back that station. So we probably can contact CBI and ask them to give us that data.
And I did say, well, I should say, I haven't said yet, but in part of the validation process that never did make it into the report in 2023, we did do the comparison that you're mentioning of looking at the data from that location. Yeah. That was Ed Buskey that pointed that out to me at the time and said, make sure it agrees, right? And so that's what we did.
So is that information public? I think that I listened that was not available anymore online, no?
No, the Tikkun station that was maintained by Texas A&M College Station, I don't think is up anymore. The one that is up in the ship channel, right at the Aransas Pass, is the port station CC0302 on the UTMSI pier. That same pier has a meteorological station through the National Estuarine Research Reserve. So you would have both data sets for the pass.
Yeah, and but that, just to be clear, that NOAA port buoy system is not proprietary to the port. I mean,
The port system.
yeah, right, and I do believe that CBI was funded to bring it back. You guys could dig in with CBI though.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay. So we talk a little bit about bathymetry, and modification number one again is making the grid more representative of the shape of the Inner Harbor Channel. And so what I'm showing here is NOAA did a detailed bathymetric survey of the Inner Harbor in 2019. This was the most recent high-quality data that I could find publicly accessible to me. And so you're seeing a graphic of the bathymetry of that Inner Harbor system around where we're planning the desalination activity. I was able to extract a cross-section going north to south, or no, from the north to the south, across the channel here, and that's the black line you see on the graph, right? And so the red box is how the current model handles the Inner Harbor. It's just a rectangular shape. It has 3 divisions and then 15 or so in the vertical direction. But the thing I wanted to point out here is, okay, the surveyed area is 4,777 square meters. Modeled area is less than that, about 86% of that in total. So wasn't bad, the approximation that we did before, but we can make it better, and that's what we're doing now. So we're looking at different grid structures to better represent that black cross-section in the model domain. And that's, next time we meet, we'll have that nailed down and show you some results of that.
Jeff, there should be dozens of cross-sections for the ship channel.
Oh, I can make a cross-section anywhere we want, at least
Huh?
from this. I can make a cross-section anywhere we want from this data, and there's tons of data for the ship channel available. So,
Well, getting the cross-section all the way out to the Gulf correct will have an impact on the flow, right?
it will, yeah,
So it's different all the way out.
yeah. Any questions or thoughts on that?
It's just this is prior to deepening, Jordan, so you're at 15 meters and they added another couple of meters to it.
Okay. Yeah, we want to make it right, whatever it is now, let's model it, so. Yeah. So here's just another graphic of the new bathymetry that we're going to add to the model. We'll make sure that it does do the proper bathymetry around the channel all the way through. Jeff, it sounded like you had some of that data to just hand to us, so rather use that than what we get from NOAA necessarily, but we'll compare all the two before we put it in there.
It's core data, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's just, I thought it was a neat graphic to show, okay, here's the bathymetry for this whole area, and then overlay the grid mesh on it and see, how we're going to simulate all that. So that's modification 1. We're working on it. Like I said, we've got a teammate right now that's actually doing that on the model grid that we're going to use. Modification 2. This is the work that DSI is doing. So DSI is of course the maker of the EFDC Plus model and the graphical user interface that I can show you later today, and executes the model, runs it all. They're the ones that wrote the code, know how what's under the hood, so to speak, and they are building in this new mathematical technique to specify inflows and outflows or inputs and outputs to the model. What we're doing in this particular location, right, we have the intake and we have the diffuser location. They're both denoted by the yellow pins that you can see on this Google Earth image. And their exact location wasn't important on this particular graphic. It's just a display. But what I wanted to do here is, of course, simulate, the model is going to calculate what the salinity is at the intake location at every time step. Then the model is going to take that salinity and that volume of water that's being withdrawn by the desalination plant. That's going to remove that from the model itself. So it's going to add sort of an external momentum, cause flow into the intake structure, but it's taking not only the water, it's taking that mass of salt. Whatever the model says the salinity level is at the intake, that's what it's taking out, multiplied by the flow rate. Then the model is going to say, okay, we're taking this much water out and we're going to desalinate it, so which means we've got a whole mass of salt that we've now removed that salt from the water, and we're going to discharge that salt back into the bay system at the diffuser location, and we're going to do that at the next model time step. And so what this allows to do is dynamically determine how the plant is going to operate, and whatever input salinity it's getting is going to be calculated by the model rather than set by the model user before the model even starts, right? And so this allows the model to potentially assess whether this is going to happen or not, whether you're going to have a discharge from the diffuser, higher salinity water that is going to mix with an ambient, but then get to the intake location and potentially be a higher salinity at the intake than would have otherwise been modeled. This is going to be able to answer that question, are we getting this feedback loop that we probably wouldn't want, right? And so a new mathematical concept we're adding to the hydrodynamic model. This is the process that is going to take us all the way to June to get into the code and tested and simulated. But it's, the process is there right now. We're working through the mathematics of it with the SI to get it to work. So
I have a question, but it's not regarding the modeling. It just seems to me completely counterintuitive to have the intake closer to the mouth of Corpus Christi Bay compared to the outflow. There's only one way that you're gonna exchange water in the Inner Harbor, right? And that's going to be with Corpus Christi Bay, or if you dump it into Nueces Bay. And it just seems backward to me that you would put the outflow closer to the bay with the hopes that that salinity will be transported out of the Inner Harbor. Otherwise, you're gonna end up, or you can end up with very high salinities in the Inner Harbor.
The net inflow, the net flow is in, it is not out.
And it is because they're pumping water to
It's
Nueces
because you're
Bay?
pumping that water.
And that's why this design is in this, and that, if that pumping were to stop, then it would be reversed. I'm guessing. I'm trying to understand what the rationale was for placing the inflow and the outflow like that. Okay.
That was it, what Roger said, that the power plant is pulling a tremendous amount of water across the ship channel at that, right across from that intake. I mean, that diffuser, the discharge diffuser.
And so this mathematical process of the dynamic calculation of salinity at the diffuser and intake location is also going to be applicable to the withdrawal of water from the power plant and then the discharge into Nueces Bay. Same with Barney Davis. It's going to be the same process that is now going to be built into a model. This is the first model that I know of that can do this. And so I'm pretty excited to see the impact of it and what it's going to do for accurately simulating salt movement through the bay.
Do you know when?
And Jordan, on your example, you show 30 million gallons of permeate and 20 million gallons of concentrate on there. Usually these plants have ratios 50-50 or a little bit less than that. So Nick, you made the design on the plant, so he's got about 66% cut or 60%.
Yeah, I know the design is not that way. The brine is higher than the net product.
Yeah,
Intake is
right,
more-
60-40.
Intake is more than twice the net product.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, when I made this slide last night, the reason I put the 30 MGD in red is because I just didn't know the exact number. So my purpose in specifying it this way was that's gonna be a variable that is put into the input of the modeling system, right? And so we can say on any given day, this is the amount that they're gonna take out and then let them, the mixing and there's separate new algorithms added to the FDC Plus model that are going to simulate the desalination process mathematically and say this is how much concentrate we're going to get and this is how much discharge we're going to put.
So what's the design parameter of the desalination? Are you talking about a constant percent salt reject? Or are you talking about a constant water product quality?
Well, as I laid it out here, is just talking about the mass of salt removed, right? And so, my thought was, okay, we're going to remove all the salt, but that's not realistic necessarily. So, we can set it up so it can be done anyway, and that's again another input decision to this algorithm that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say set it up in such a way where you can alter that, because there is ways to dilute the concentrate either by increasing the intake or by adding other sources to dilute it. And so being able to modify both of those independently would be helpful, because all the drop, if the modeling's wrong, the drop back scenarios for how to run the plant with that, those are the first two things, is take in more intake water, and then if that isn't sufficient, grab and pre-blend more wastewater from other places.
Right.
So.
Yep. Trying to make it as user flexible as possible, but still handle at least the basics of the mixing process.
So I was wondering, do you know when DSI is anticipating to finish the modification?
Well, we're going to present at the end of June. That's
Okay.
basically it.
And the reason I was asking is because I was wondering if you're going to print the base case runs before the modification is done, if you're going to wait for that to happen and then print all the runs afterwards.
Well, we've got to show results at the end of April too, so we're going to have those without this simulated in it. Yeah.
Are you going to rerun
We'll have
them
to,
all
yeah.
in June?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to check on that.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're not showing the importance of this, right, or lack of importance. I don't know at this stage, but, we want to show the results and see what it comes up with.
I would just add that I think this is very important work to do because the opportunity for recirculation for high salinity climbs during a period of time, especially when the tidal velocity changes is really low, right? So without that concern, I don't think we're getting really the potential impact of, call it short time domain changes in salinity and how that might impact the biology. So, good work.
I'm glad that DSI has taken on that because they're much more familiar with the EFTC Plus source code than I am, and we were smart to bring them onto the team. You guys were smart to hire them because they're going to make this done much more efficiently than I can do it. All right, modification number 3. This is the vessel propeller wash induced mixing. So this is an existing module within the EFTC Plus now. They have developed it over the years and have applied it to estuary situations all across the world. What I'm showing here is a Google Earth image. I think this was from 2017. And you can see 2 ships actively traversing the canal or the ship channel, inner harbor, and you can see the wake that's being induced. At least from the one to the right. Both of them show wake, but it's like a tugboat pushing the barge. But the point is you can visibly see the mixing that's occurring from this wake, and we want to incorporate that into the hydrodynamics of the EFTC Plus model. Yes.
In the interest of time and efficiency, again, looking at worst case conditions, do we really need to spend a lot of time with this? Because you can't always count that there would be ship traffic. So the worst case condition for concentration would be without the ships, right?
Yeah, so it's actually, I sent Jordan a pretty lengthy email about this. I mean, I think that you're exactly right. I'll make a distinction here. Again, I don't think it's just wakes, prop wakes. I think it's displacement from fully laden vessels. There's a difference in terms of the hydrodynamics, but I think that if you look at the maximal temporal duration between passage of vessels that would induce full depth mixing, that's the time. That's sort of the time you work with, because that would be the interval over which stratification could set up. But I agree with you that in the absence of vessel-induced mixing, it should be a more conservative look, except in the case of whether vessel-induced mixing exacerbates the interaction between the intake and discharge. So to the extent that looking at that as a priority, the mixing then becomes important.
Right. So I would say, again, I'm just trying to appreciate the amount of time that you have. If we got to worst case conditions and everything looked fine, but we can layer on the things that would help mediate it, right, as we proceed. But if we worked worst case conditions up front, simplified what you're doing, we would first know the magnitude of the potential problem. I mean, that's how I did modeling when there was an area of concern. Does this, and so that's your judgment call. I have no aversion to having done this, but I do believe the most case condition is going to be without this.
Ferdinand, this group talks on you take actually what happened in years past and you model it forward. So don't you have to assume some ships are going up and down the canal?
So far, no. I mean, none of the modeling that we've done previously has the ships and their impacts in it.
It had no ships in it?
None.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Brad, but the premise of the model is you take actual data like rainfall and salinity levels and inflows and what actually happened, and then you future forecast it. We know ships have gone up and down that canal for a long time. They do every day. And it's billions of dollars when they don't. Billions lost. So just more, but a good point. You could assume the worst case and everything, plug them in, but Ferdinand will have to tell us how to do it, or what to do.
What you want to get at as quickly as you can is, do we have a problem or not? And in the amount of time that we have, if we focus on worst case and then we layer back in. And again, if everything looks great, we'd say, well, it can only get better from here. And we can get perhaps to some initial results earlier, give these guys a little bit more time to interact. And then again, you still have to consider, what if we had some reason where we had no ship traffic for a week or something?
Yeah, that has happened during Christmas 2 years ago.
You know, it happens when you have a hurricane. There's all
hurricane,
kinds
too.
of other things going on. When there's not extreme weather, the ships are flowing.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think this is, and aside from being exciting from a nerdy hydrodynamic standpoint, I think this is going to be instrumental in demonstrating, you know, the effects of ship traffic on this discharge, right? And so I'm excited to see where it's going. I have a couple just demonstrations that we put together so far, so you can get a sense of this, and I'm going to show them here. Did I get?
Jordan, while you're trying that, can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
Unrelated to ship traffic at all, but that image of the ship channel, it just reminded me of an estuary in North Carolina that I used to work in terms of the shape and size of it. And the question I had is, you know, we're talking primarily about water moving in and moving out of the ship channel, right?
Yep.
But just going back to my work in that system, occasionally when you would get winds blowing from the south, you would get a cross-channel movement of water at the surface toward the other side, but then you would get that deeper water brought up on that southern side, and you would, in that system, you had hypoxia and all kind of issues when you had that type of situation. Are we thinking at all about that across-channel mixing here and what that might mean, as opposed to just water moving in and out of the system?
The hydrodynamics take all that into account. Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely part of it. Whatever the wind direction's modeled in, it gets input that way and transfers energy and does the currents that way. So okay, let's see if this works. Yeah. All right. So this is a demonstration. I don't know if we can move that sharing box up to the top. Be good. So you see what I'm saying? It says you're sharing on the bottom. Yeah. No, you don't want to stop it. I want you to move that whole box up to the top. There we go. That'll work. That's fine. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So this is there's two graphics here. The first graphic is where it says initial conditions right at the top. That top upper graphic, you see the big red bar going across this. This is looking as a bird's eye view on a mythical inner harbor area. So this is just a straight channel. It's about 400 meters wide, I believe. This one is only simulated to be 10 meters deep. But what you've got here is two boats, labeled Boat 1 and Boat 2. They're going in opposite directions. Boat 1 is a much bigger boat. Boat 2 is smaller. They have different properties, different masses, different propeller size and rates. And we built this as a demonstration to see what mixing, what vessel-induced mixing is going to do. And so what you're seeing in that red bar, that is the salinity at the third cell from the bottom, so roughly 1 meter above the bottom. And at the start, we were initially at 100 parts per thousand. So this is not a realistic representation of the inner harbor yet. We just did this as a demo. Next time we meet, I'll have one of these that's geared specifically for the inner harbor with the shape and all that, just for this area. But so that's the top one. We're looking at 9 meters depth. Right now at the beginning, it starts at 100 parts per thousand. The bottom graphic is like you're looking at a cross-section through the channel. So the top of the blue is the surface, the bottom of the blue is 9 feet deep, and then the bottom red layer, that's a 1 meter thick, initially 100 parts per thousand salinity layer, right? So this is simulating a high density, high salinity layer at the bottom of a channel, and what's going to happen when these two boats go over it, right? And so that's the initial part. I'm going to skip to the next screen. If I can, there we go. Oop, there we go. So here is the just same graphic, but this is the end of the simulation. The boats have passed each other, and they're now on opposite ends of that channel. And you can see that they mixed their wake in this simulation, mixed down to that 9-meter layer where we had originally 100 parts per thousand. Now we're in the 50 or less parts per thousand. So quite a lot of mixing in that 9-foot layer. What you can still see in the bottom, though, is that depth from 10 meters to, say, 9.66 meters is still the high salinity, right? So we were successful in this case of disrupting some of that salinity gradient, right? But it's still, there is still a salinity gradient there. Again, this is just 2 boats passing in this one simulation. When we build this same thing for the proper depth and the proper orientations of the ship channel and put a couple different boats on there, I hope to see, you know, what does it do for destroying the you know, making sure that we've got good vertical mixing of salinity all the way through the system.
Jordan,
Yes,
what you're calling a boat, what's the size of this boat?
I don't know. This one was created by the guys at DSI, so I don't have that information
Okay.
right now.
And just as a point of reference, it was 2012, I brought my company here, and we were going to position ourselves at the La Quinta Channel. One of the reasons doing that at the old Navy base was that we wanted to have a source of cool water. And we got some data, I don't know, maybe Mike, you know more about this, but we were seeing very high salinities drawing down from the bottom right there where we found this cool water. So just as a point of reference, and I could maybe go back and find my partner, that professor that had that data at the time, but obviously that salinity gradient is there even as ships are passing by now. I don't know, Mike, do you know if there's this, or anybody else here know if we have data at different points in the channel?
Well, there should be a boundary layer down there.
There is, yeah.
There has to be. That's the science, okay? But it's how big is it and how material is it? But there will be a boundary layer.
But if we had data, it would be helpful in this modeling to have that as a point of reference.
Yep.
But I'm not aware that there's a continuous one or one that we can get data from. No?
I know Fries and Nichols, I think they did some measurements in the La Quinta and Inner Harbor Channel. It wasn't like months worth of measurements, but
But they have some.
I think they went back at least 2 or 3 times, and they did DO, temperature, and salinity, and there was varying amounts of gradients in the channels.
And I have that data. I haven't played with it yet to incorporate it.
Yeah.
Good.
Jose, there was a year's worth of data, right, from Fries and Nichols' work that was made available to you.
That information was passed to Jordan.
Yeah, you have all of that, right, George?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is the actual video of the simulation. I'm not sure if it's going to play or not. If you could hit it, just hit the play button. There we go. So you can see the progression of the boats as they travel towards each other in the wake mixing.
So just for the record here, totally agree with Brad that we're still dancing around first principle components, like kind of waiting to see what just, you know, the primary results of discharge look like without all these ancillary factors. Full stop. Second comment, to the extent that we are going to take a look at vessels, the vessel class, frequency, all the things I mentioned in the emails, which we can provide to you, really matters, because we have some vessels that are, you know, effectively laden, maximally laden, utilizing the full depth of channel, at least in one direction, right? So getting the temporal cadence, irregular as it is, of those vessels, which we have that historic data. I mean, you know, we can do all the validation you want to do, but you know, the vessel specs really, really matter in this distinction between displacement and wake.
I agree. Yep, I definitely agree. Let's go to the next one.
There's ship velocity information available also.
Yeah, less so.
less, velocity is gonna be much harder on a historical basis.
Yeah, but there's a system out there that's tracking all the vessels continuously.
Again, there are some complications with using AIS for that, but certainly vessel size, relative, light versus heavy, and
So EFBC Plus, what's shown on this slide is it has the capability of taking the AIS data and inputting it into there. We can also just input whatever data we wanted for mythical ships, or if we want to simulate the Titanic, we can do that, right? It's fine. So the model is set up where we can do all of this with all the information. My plan for this effort is twofold. One is to add the ship traffic in the inner harbor when we simulate the entire bay circulation system, but also to do one of these smaller scale. This is just looking at the inner harbor and showing the mixing as a couple ships go by and see what it does. And I can do both of those simultaneously with the team that I've got in the time frame we've got. So that's the plan to move forward with it. And Jeff, you and I will be in contact very soon about all this. This is my top priority for next week. So a lot of input data that goes into this. We can get all of that. Moving on to modification number 4, this is the input conditions. This is material that Amin and his team put together. So they took the 2010, 2011 data and the model that I developed for the port, and it had some of the dischargers in it, but it didn't have all of them. And so they have subsequently gotten all of that data, all of the dischargers that were discharging at that time, and gotten their actual discharge amounts. I think there's additional animation, yeah. So you can zoom in here and see, more of where in the ship channel days were put, and then we've got tables of data saying this is what the flow rates actually were, this is what the maximum flow rate could have been with a full permitted amount, and all of that is now going to be implemented into this existing model. They've already done it, and that's the version that we're going to be working from as we go forward.
Jordan?
Do you want to add anything, Amin?
No, just one clarification. Just one clarification for you see similar names in multiple locations, and that's like because one permit has multiple outfalls, and like we look at the permits and look at like some of these outfalls are connected and eventually will discharge through one single outfall even though there are multiple outfalls. So it dumps to a ditch and then go to something and it goes to a pipe and then eventually goes. So that's why in the next slide, then you see the actual model representation of those. Some of these are already combined into one single location because even though there are multiple outfalls, they're kind of going through one single outlet.
Next slide is actually just a table that shows what was included in the model, all the different discharges, their minimum maximum flows, the average and median flows, temperature flows where we had it, and intake information. So all of this is what's been built into the models now. And you notice there's no salinity mentioned here. There wasn't data available. We're assuming it's 0 or 1 part per thousand in all of these discharges.
Where is the power plant flow?
Where is the power plant flow?
Yeah, it's the intake, NBPS intake.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, and on the right side table, you can see from the bottom maybe this. No, okay. Yeah.
Question.
Go to the bottom of it. It's actually in the bottom. More. Here we go.
And when you can you point out on the map where that falls into New Aces Bay?
Go back one slide, I guess.
I don't have control of it. There.
So you can see that dot, the black dot on NBBS on the new system.
On the far right.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, are you guys, what I can't remember is for either Allison or the Broadway plants, are they having some of their wastewater taken offline and being used by industry? So that reclamation project, I think it was, is that
Right,
happening?
so there's our water reuse project.
yeah.
So currently there's projections for Allison.
Okay. Okay.
And then currently, there is not any use at Broadway. Potentially, there may be though, but currently there's nothing contracted for
Okay,
Broadway.
so Allison, it sounds like that discharge may come offline and instead get reused in the system.
Part of it.
Yeah, so Allison could be anywhere from 1 million gallons a day to 3 million gallons a day utilized for reuse.
Okay, so are you all gonna,
They would, Jordan and his team would have to take into account for
okay.
that.
And then I guess Broadway, although there's nothing concrete now, there are plans to do that. Do we need to have a scenario where that is taken offline as well?
I would say once things get a little more concrete, right? You don't want to, and we'll know in the next couple of weeks some more details. So I think your question is, will we know in time to make adjustments to the amount? So once we have more info, we'll share it. But yeah, makes sense.
And also, I want to clarify that the numbers that you were seeing was based on the DMR values, so it's actual data. That's why you see the average and median. There, of course, there's a minimum, the maximum, and there's like a discharge, the permit value. So depending on what scenario you want to run, you can use the actual data that happened, historical one, or you can go to full permit value or whatever that you want. So that's something that you want to actually talk to the committee at some point about, like what exact scenario you all want this to be run under.
I don't know whether this makes any difference in your model, but there's some wastewater plants that discharge into Nueces Bay directly. Odom, Taft, and Portland. They're all fairly small plants, less than 2 MGD, but they discharge on the north shore of Nueces Bay.
Yeah, all those need to be included, including a potential new wastewater plant, not potential, but for Port Aransas. It's in construction right now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Port Aransas discharges into directly to Corpus Christi Bay, but
they sure do.
Those other 3 discharge into Nueces Bay. It's well on the north shore.
So just to stay, I'm not taking any notes right now, but I'm glad this is being recorded because I'll review it later. Yeah, good. So I will get all this information that we say we're going to do this, or it must be included. We'll get it in there.
I mean, Carl's comment is very important to be able to capture all of those flows. And
yeah.
And with, development, to know what they're doing now, as opposed, it's important to get that data. And we'll get it for you. We've got our partners in those other municipalities.
Great.
Jordan,
one other thing.
On the flow on the power plant, I see here that it varies substantially. I thought it was like a straight fixed RPM pump in this case. But apparently they must valve it or variable speed drive it. I don't know, but from your modeling standpoint.
Power plants don't run flat out all the time. The quantity of water they use varies with how much electricity they're making.
Right, I'm just wondering on the CFM, on the flow, on the flow here, how he's gonna model that. I guess you're gonna do it high and low.
All right. Is this data from 2011?
This is 10 and 11. Yes.
Okay. At that point, the Nueces Bay and the Barney Davis plant were what I call merchant plants, that their output is based on demand. Both of those plants have now been bought by CPS Energy of San Antonio, and ostensibly are going to be running to provide power to San Antonio. So I would assume that they would be running pretty much constantly. Okay. You probably can verify that through the CPS people.
So what we are doing, as we are speaking, I'm actually one of our staff is looking at it. We are actually looking at the DMR from 2011 to now, and then that's like, if they report whatever they report, we will use that value as a time series in the model.
On Broadway, that plant is designed and built to be a substantially larger treatment facility, and so one of the possibilities is also transferring wastewater load to that plant to treat more and therefore increase discharge there. So keep that in mind in terms of different scenarios and things like that. Because I think that's probably step 3 or 4.
Right, and that has been considered and continues to be considered.
Yeah.
Great.
Correct. Yeah.
And you shouldn't assume that all of the outflows along the ship channel have the same salinity, because one of the things refineries do is take salt out of crude oil. So the discharge from our waste treatment plant will be a higher salt content than the other outfalls.
Okay. Do we have any estimates or knowledge of what the salt content is?
They're out there. I don't have any perspective for it.
Okay.
There should be some data there.
Yeah, I've got some of it from other projects and see what we can do. So this slide, I wanted to explain it a little bit. So you're in the background picture, you see Nueces Bay as it's modeled, and it's partially covered up by the foreground picture. You see the model extent of the inner harbor all shown in green, because we're looking at bathymetry in this particular figure. And what it's showing is the discharges that are placed throughout the inner harbor. The upper graph is giving you, we call it looking at a curtain, really, is you can imagine a line going through the inner harbor from the upper end all the way down through the Corpus Christi ship channel, through the Aransas Pass and out into the Gulf, right? And so this right edge, no, don't zoom in, please. Zoom back out. So the right edge there where it's shown in green, right, that is the upper end of the inner harbor. And as you progress on that upper image from the right to the left, you're getting towards the Gulf. Okay, so it took me a while to look at this and figure that out, because I didn't create this graphic, but it's just a quirk in the way that EFDC Plus outputs this particular graphic type. But what you can see is the vertical grid discretization that was used, the bathymetry along the channel, so it's fairly constant. You can see the deep portion out near the very left side of that graph. That's the so-called bathymetric hole around the Harbor Island area. What this is showing is where we're locating the discharges that are modeled for the inner harbor. And you can see them all labeled up there. Now you can zoom in on that section if you want. Yeah, just up in there. So you can see we've shown them spatially along the distance, along the curtain or the channel, you want to call it. And then the arrows are pointing to the actual elevation at which the discharges are occurring and are simulated in the model. So this is just give you the idea of, we take it, it's all very important in terms of where we're getting the mixing inside that inner harbor.
Jordan, I need to add a clarification. Only the one that has a circle inside, we have the actual elevation that the discharge happened or intake happened, that we got them from the permit. For the rest, we do not have. So as of now, it's like a depth average discharge, but we also need your all's input on that one. If you have any information about any of those, that hey, we know as a matter of fact that this one is discharging on the surface versus this one is like a mid depth, or this one is like at the bottom. We really appreciate if you can provide that information too.
So the ones without circles don't have a specific.
Correct.
Okay, I was wondering about the Nueces Bay power plant location, because on the permit it says it's 20 feet to 45 feet deep, and I've seen a study from, I guess it was TCQ back in the 70s or 80s that said it was 30 feet deep. And
Says 7 meters there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's 21-ish feet.
Yeah, 22 feet. Yeah, I think we got the average probably of that range, and then just put it there.
Okay.
Yeah, again, these are something that we can easily change. So if you all want to make any changes to any of these, just let us know.
So, Jose, will we be getting information that's been presented? In other words, there's been some tables previously and now this graphic. If we can get all that, we can vet it for you. But you need to.
I think
Because
that's
last
something we
time
can do and
around,
want to do.
We pointed to all kinds of errors.
Yep.
And bet you there's still a few, so earlier, if we can get a look at it, we can.
Also, I want to mention that what you saw on the tables was only 2010 and 11, and now we are moving forward much more, as like there are new permits and all of that. So we can provide that table to you also to kind of go through all the whole list.
Yeah, I think it's a review of the inputs, right, Roger? Because as we all talked about, information changes over the years, needs to be more current, and more updated information may be available with this team, because there's a broad spectrum of backgrounds here.
So the
Absolutely.
older validation is worth something, but the new validation is crucial, current time frame.
I just want to get back to the point of worst-case condition and the opportunity that we have right now with conditions being worst case. So starting from that point, I don't know how much spatial data is available, but right now it's kind of an opportune time to get more data. Or I don't know if you folks have any insights as to what's coming in, but if we're at 50 PPT, that's a bad condition for fish, right now. But just getting back to the modeling point, I think that if you were to take these as initial conditions to work from right now, it would give us some real insight as to where the impact of the problem is at this worst case condition. So whatever data there is available, and starting with that 50 PPT and I don't know, do you know where that is? Is that throughout Nueces Bay?
No, that's up near the Delta. Dr. Stansel can definitely get you guys that data or show you where to get. Sorry.
Where's the Delta?
It's in the upper part of Nueces Bay. Yeah.
Nueces Delta.
Yeah. So, yes, Dr. Stansel with Basin Estuaries can point you in the direction of that information. In terms of all other data, I mean, you're really stuck with fixed stations like Ticoon and probably NER sites, so it's a little bit limited. If you really wanted to be, out there, you could see if you could put a salinity sensor on like a ship of opportunity and get some, spatial data. Maybe Jeff would be kind enough to facilitate that or something. I don't know.
I think there is I need to go back and ask my former colleagues at TWDB, but I think there is like a Corpus Christi buoy as well that TWDB put, and that has some salinity data in it as well. So that could be used for better initialization or any like type of validation. Also, I want to say that team want to talk about the power plant he's virtually connected. Can he talk through the?
Oh, hey guys, this is Tim. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Well, back to an earlier conversation, I just wanted to point out about the discharge monitoring records. Those are monthly volumes that are reported, and that's what we have. And to the point of the power stations and their actual operations, they turn on one pump set or two pump sets or all the pump sets. They may operate like that for 6 hours a day, and then they turn them off and it's zero. We don't have any of that hourly data. We do not have any of that daily data. All we have is the total volume that's reported in a month. And so what we've done for the input data sets is to distribute those total volumes evenly across every day. So we can, in the model, the input data we have allows us to vary those amounts month to month, but not hour to hour, not day to day, which this model, if we had that data, it could account for all that. We just don't have that data.
Again, maybe,
point that out.
sure, one way to simplify that again would be look again at worst case conditions. And I guess it goes two ways though. One worst case is what's worse for salinity increase in stratification in ship channel, and then what's worst case condition for the power plant out, sucking that in and putting it into New Aces Bay. But I don't, you know, that's two input conditions. That's not hard, you know, work for you guys to do to change those parameters, I don't think, right?
It's not, yeah.
Yeah, and to that, the two power plants, typically in the spring and the fall, they call them outages. It'd be a turnaround on there. They can run 3 to 4 weeks. They're going in and doing things to the plant. So it's very common in those shoulder seasons to have an outage. And they're scheduled outages with it, like say, Roger, it's just like a turnaround. But the plants are shut down for a specific amount of time as they're performing maintenance work on it. And it can run almost a month.
So during those turnarounds, if say an Oasis, I don't know if it would go completely offline, but the relooping concern, right, from the intake to the discharge on the actual desal plant, and then we have the tidal, because you can't, we're banking on the movement of water from the plant. If the plant shuts down for even, say, a 2-week turnaround or a 3-week turnaround, that cloud, isn't it gonna go back towards the Lexington area, which is the side of the intake? Or am I wrong? I don't know.
Yeah, it could. Yeah.
And I think I looked at tidal change there recently with something, I was building a model. I think it's less than a foot of tidal change further out. So by the time we look at a dead leg with a power plant flow there, so I think this would be very interesting from a worst case condition to look at that with the power plant off would present a real opportunity for recirculation. Not to say that's what we want to, you know, base any final decision on in terms of fisheries, but it could accumulate, so.
So that's what we've got slide-wise. I do have the 2023 unmodified model. We can look at it. I can show you how it works. We can talk about what results you would like to see. We've got an hour. We can play cards if you want. I mean, I'm here for you, so.
Would it be interesting for you to take a look at the previous model?
Yes. Okay then.
Yeah, Jordan, which model is this?
So this is the model that created for the port and published in 2023.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to give us a high-level overview of some of the things. I mean, you said earlier this model focused in on La Quinta. What are some of the other higher-arching goals of the model, just so that everybody's aware of it?
All right, everybody should be able to see it there. So this model was specifically designed to focus on the area around the upper portion of the La Quinta Channel. So if I zoom in here, we were asked to pick the best spot for siting a discharge location for a potential desal plant at that location. That was the goal of the model. And so I built it specifically to focus on that. I mean, I definitely wanted to have the La Quinta Channel simulated in the model. That's the green area you can see there. We were looking at a discharge location somewhere where my cursor is here. The intake was right where the cursor is there now.
Yeah, can you show, I can't see the cursor.
There's no way for me to show it any differently.
Okay, no, that's okay. Just try to do it again.
Yeah, okay, you can zoom in a little bit. So we had, the intake was
okay.
Yeah, somewhere not quite as far to the west, somewhere in this area now where the cursor is. And then there were 3 different options that we were considering for the discharge location. And then we were trying to figure out which would be the best location for that discharge hydrodynamically and mixing wise. And you know, you've got a deep channel and you've got a shallow portion of the bay. Which would be better, right, was the goal of this particular model. So getting this model right, we wanted to get La Quinta Channel represented as best we could. Let's see if I can zoom back out. You know, we had, come on.
The
So here,
graphic you had up previously was a dead end, right?
sorry, what?
The graphic you had up previously was a dead-ended channel.
The La Quinta channel, yeah. Yeah, it's a big vertical wall, right at that location. You know, we simulated the channel coming in from the Gulf, the inner harbor area, main Corpus Christi ship channel. We have the Gulf Coast Intercoastal Waterway running through the system in, you know, approximately the right spot. And we focused mainly on that La Quinta channel area and the area around our discharge. The rest of the bay, we wanted to get as right as possible, but we didn't put a huge amount of effort in getting everything perfect. Yes, we're looking at depth again, yep. So you can clearly see the channels, and then the depth throughout the bay. I think we can make some improvements on that. You can see the depth in what at least I'm calling Redfish Bay, and I'm not sure exactly where it extends, but just north of the ship channel here, this bathymetry was giving me fits in the model, and so I just fudged it and put it in the best I could. We can improve that, but that's what modelers do, especially when they're crunched for time and budget at that particular project. So not to say that wasn't a great project, it was fantastic, and we got a really good model out of it. But you know, there's always things you could do better the next time you improve the model, and that's what we're doing now. So here's the model. We have the capability of, you know, this model we ran for the 2-year period, 2 years and 2 months technically, but we don't count the spin-up time. If you wanted to see results of the model, we can go in and we can pick a spot. So pick a spot wherever you want, and I can just click on it and get results. So Nueces Bay on the ship channel. Okay. All right, so if we want to look at Nueces Bay, I will just select any particular spot. Well, let's look at one thing at a time. You're demanding. All right. So we just picked the cell, and what do you want to see? Do you want to see the salinity at the bottom? Yeah. Okay. So we'll go with the bottom layer, salinity at that location. And so once you've run the model, right, you have all the data loaded into this. It's an easy interface with which to extract whatever data you want. So at that particular location in Nueces Bay, we were getting this time series of salinity values. It looks like that ranges from 12.5 at the low up to 37.5 in the high at the beginning of the model period.
What do we think that time period is of these downward spikes?
That's basically the October period where we got quite a lot of rainfall.
No, I mean,
Turn on your mic, Brad.
what's the width of that filter length?
Oh, are you talking what the time step is shown here is, or?
No, just how much time that is.
Well, yeah, the whole graph is 2 years.
Yeah, those are usually a couple days. I mean, usually when we get a big rainfall, it'll go super fresh for a couple days. There'll be a time delay while everything flows in, then it'll go super fresh and it'll taper off.
Yeah.
You're seeing this huge incursion, it just seems like the freshwater is coming and going, so we're not seeing different tides coming.
So it seems that is like between 4 to 6 days. Like from the point that it goes down all the way to go up is 4 to 6 days.
Yeah, this is model data.
Correct.
So the model is saying there's something forcing function that's making this happen. This was not imparting new freshwater inflow on an irregular basis. So what's causing that spike in the model?
So it could be like a like freshwater inflow from the river that has a boundary condition, or it could be the rain on mesh, as Jordan mentioned.
You have control over that in a model.
That's real data that we put in the model. So
Oh, okay, so you are inputting fluctuating
Correct.
freshwater.
it's a time series for both flow and rainfall that goes to the model.
All right.
Can we see some movement in the model, some velocity or anything like that, or salinity changing?
Yeah. Let's see how we want to show that. Let's do it this way if we show.
Where was the discharge on this model proposed? Like exact location?
For which plant?
Well, this is the La Quinta, is that correct? This is La Quinta model?
Yeah, this is the La Quinta model. This is without any modeled desal discharge. So this
Oh,
just
no
had-
desal, okay.
Yeah.
This is ambient, okay.
So here is just the bay-wide salinity. It starts off at whatever I initially set it at, and you run through the spin-up period, and we can run this time slider so we look into the future at some point. This is depth average salinity. It was getting really saline water up in the Oasis Bay, but you can see the distribution from greens to yellows and some oranges in Oso Bay. This was the depth average, again, calculated at March of 2011, right? And so they have animations where you can just see how it changes over time. It's hard to see that, and you can see some of it here. You can get an idea of tidal fluxes and how that changes things.
Can you please put on the tabs with your parameters and the output variables for a second?
Tabs with the parameters and output variables. So we can go here and we can specify all the internal and external forcing data. If we wanted to look at what the winds data were, it tells us what that is there.
Well, you were selecting, for example, you wanted to see the bottom salinity or the average salinity.
Yes, okay.
And that's what I'm looking for, like, what do you have in there?
Oh, okay, what our options are to see?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Yeah, so if we go to the time series here, this gives you the window of everything you want to see. We have, under primary groups, it lists all different types of data that's either input or modeled data. And so if we wanted to see the velocity vectors, we can go into hydrodynamics. Actually, no, that gives us density and bed shear, but there's, you saw it?
No, on the primary group.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Velocity, so we get velocity magnitudes, you can get directions, you can show the flows, you can also get vectors as arrows. And you can specify a depth average or by layer, so that's the vertical layer in the models.
Can you do a vertical profile?
You can.
Okay. Including of density?
Yeah. The GUI for this, right, is set up so you can answer all of these questions. And so you can do vertical profiles at one given point. You can do the curtains that we showed before that show the variable at one snapshot in time, but shows it depth and longitudinal lengths. You can do it the spatial domain that you can see. So all of this, we can pretty much output any type of data display that you want to see, which is the benefit of this GUI, why I really like this particular model. I also then take the data from it and export it from this software package. It exports as a text file that I can then play with in MATLAB and make graphics that I like the look of, right? And so you saw some of those today, but we can do a lot of different things with that and showing this data in a user-friendly way.
That'll be very useful, thanks.
Before you move off of this, is that dark, right, I think it's where is that where the power plant outflow is in the?
It's close to it, yeah, it's.
So what is that telling us there? Is that?
right there, it's telling us that it's highly saline at that point, and it's probably that cell just has a very shallow depth right at that time. My guess, it concentrates it all there. This particular model, the way it was set up, we didn't put a huge focus again on Nueces Bay, so we didn't try and maximize the agreement with bathymetry that we had and what we put in the model. Now we have better bathymetry data for Nueces Bay, so we're going to improve all that in this simulation.
And then again, here, we have no desalination plant simulated. So.
That's right.
Okay.
So will we be able to access some of the runs that y'all produce? That way we can look at it like we're doing right now?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I can make all this data available. You know, that's ultimately up to the city, and I'll follow their lead. But the trick with this software, right, is it's got a license fee associated with it. So to be able to do what we're looking at right now, we've got to pay some money.
Well, you can download a trial version and look at all the results.
Can you?
That's what I've done.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I guess you can.
Yeah.
Great. I've never done that. I've always bought the
Okay.
license.
Yeah, that's why I
But
asked.
you can only do it once with an IP, so you cannot do it next time.
You know what? We know the owner of the software and the proprietor of the license, so we could probably set something up where they could give you temporary access if you needed to. So I can't say for sure that they'd be willing to do that, but I would be shocked if they did. Said no.
Cool.
We'd be willing to share the data too, Ferdinand?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're willing to share it.
Okay.
Yeah, just saying. Yeah.
Great. You know, I'm happy to, I don't know the best way to disseminate that. You know, the port has a great website that they set up for that. You know, we can set up something similar, I guess, maybe. I'm not sure how to even do that, but SharePoint sites we can do for sure.
So the input files are easy, they're not that hard. But like the entire model input is probably 90 megabytes or 100 megabytes. The output file each 2 years is around 30 gigabytes. So if you have multiple scenarios and multiple years, just be aware of the storage as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had 18 different scenario runs for the port in 23, and that's quite a lot of data over time.
Yeah, it's a lot of data. I only have 4 on my computer because that's, you know, I wouldn't have much space for anything else other than that.
Yeah.
Just coming back to focus on energy and time, and maybe the biology folks could chime in here, but I've had this in my mind that we're looking at, in one case, short-term duration activities, changes that might affect a fishery, and then we're interested in long-term. So I think there's 2 of these things to look at. And so again, because of the multiplicity of input parameters that, you know, coming in and doing worst case conditions on each of those is a lot to do in itself. So I don't know if you have a map out of where you're going to start in terms of, you know, that's why I say in terms of, you know, what the effect of the ship stuff, you know, I wouldn't get lost in that right away. Might be nice stuff to have, but I think worst case condition is going to be important to get at pretty quickly to see if we've got a problem. And then even inside of that, you know, first thing, at least from my own work, was that these freshwater inflows are very significant in how this behaves. I think that's anecdotally as well from the fishermen. So I'm interested in seeing what layout of sequence, and not to get in front of you too much, but I'm just looking at how much time we have and chance to interact with you. So as soon as you have kind of a map, a plan, excuse me, of what you're going to start out with, initial conditions and boundary conditions.
Okay.
And I'd be wanting to see both of those, and I'm interested. Personally, I've always thought you could develop a nice mixer. So I think you could probably do that in the ship channel. I'm not saying that we wouldn't get stratification and accumulation there. So yes, we need to do that, But I'd like to see what happens in Nueces Bay, because as we see right now, that's where salinity is hurting the most during the worst case conditions. And we start putting that flow into that point in Nueces Bay and seeing what happens in that is like trying to get to the critical point of understanding as soon as we can. So that's my 2 cents again. That's 4 cents.
Sounds like the next order of business I have is to write up a little document saying these are the scenarios that we're
Yes.
planning. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would just comment, I mean, it looked like from that flow data that worst case scenario is is actually the power plant not running into Nueces Bay, because given how much freshwater inflow you had on that graph, that's the inflow from the power plant is actually diluting the salinity in Nueces Bay.
But keep that in mind, there's an intake in the inner harbor as well. So if you turn that off, the other one needs to be turned off as well.
Right, no, I'm saying that because what is happening is there's so much freshwater inflow into inner harbor already that is getting pulled, and that would get pulled into Nueces Bay. But you had more freshwater inflow into inner harbor than were taken out mass balance wise from this plant. So, that's what the chart you showed was. So, in that case, if Nueces Bay is 50 and we're putting 34 salinity water in, we're diluting Nueces Bay. We're not making it more saline.
You're calling 34 fresh.
Well, I meant there's so much fresh going in that it brings, it's offsetting whatever's getting taken out. I'd also point out that at some point, if you're taking 30 out, it is not disappearing from the cycle. A certain portion of that is going back in someplace. And while we do have outflow, actually the end status of all of the stuff that's going on right now on wastewater reuse is we are essentially pulling all of our discharge that exists, that goes back into the environment directly. We're pulling all of it back up to this area. I think that is essentially what the city's plan is in various forms.
That's modification too in a way as well, right? Because you basically make that dynamic link between intake and discharge.
We are, but I think what he's talking about is the idea that any of this desalinated water that gets used by the city ultimately does return as a wastewater source into the system, and that's not necessarily being included.
Correct. And so, I think, some of it goes on people's grass and evaporates, some of it goes into a machine and evaporates, but a significant portion of it goes into the wastewater discharge system and goes back into the bay system as discharge. And so if we're pulling 30 out, the reason we're pulling 30 out is because we're going to use it. And so a certain portion of that's going to come back in, and it's going to come back in the northern part of the bay system.
Okay.
So is there any evidence of where a new wastewater treatment plant or where a new outfall of those existing one is gonna be?
So I think the current plan is that they're pulling 10 from Greenwood, no, they're pulling 2 from Allison right now, and then, 8 from Greenwood.
Yeah, Greenwood doesn't have 8, yeah. That makes it worse. Greenwood's 4 or 5.
And then another, I don't know, so, they're building the pipeline from.
Treating about 4.5.
Okay.
You guys, can we get a city staff member to tell we know what the facts are. Do you know where Nick is, Esteban?
He just had to step
Yeah, we don't want to mislead people there. So number one, we haven't done anything. It's going to be a year before any exchange takes place. Secondly, it's not, the 30 million is what is discharged, but we're only gonna capture about 16 of that in this effluent reuse. So the other 16 is going to golf courses, going to TAMUCC, and so on. It's between 16 and 19 if we account for the Allison. There's just 3 plants that are going to be, maybe 4 if you include Broadway. There's the Oso, the Greenwood, and Allison. But in total, right now, what we've been saying is 16 million gallons is what would be reused through industrial processing. But the rest is either, there is a level that is still discharged in the Oso area, as an example. The water that's being used today to irrigate lawns at the 2 golf courses and at TAM UCC would continue. There's water that's being used for the Oso, the Bill Witt Park, that would continue to be used in that way. Yeah. But everything, the pipeline, there is a pipeline that has to be built from the Greenwood across the city to the Ship Channel area. That's about a year, 1 to 2 years. They've told us 2, but now it may be sooner. But here's Nick. He'll tell us. Nick, can you give us the facts on the effluent reuse program? How many million gallons from what plant?
Absolutely. So the total available from Greenwood currently is 3 MGD. Valero is constructing a line from Greenwood to Valero to utilize that 3 million gallons a day. And then additionally, the city is constructing a line from Greenwood, or from Oso to Greenwood, that will deliver approximately 10 million gallons a day to Greenwood, which then frees up. Valero will take 5 of that, and then the additional 5 will be future customers. Flint Hills is taking 1 to 3 from Allison.
Still, do you know how much discharge is being reserved for the Bay system at Oso in particular? There's still some discharge happening, right?
There's multiple millions gallons a day. I know Ardura has done studies and they're working on a tech memo to ensure that there'll be no adverse impact.
And that's true for Greenwood too, for the Oso system?
Yeah, they've also, because Greenwood discharges into Oso Creek, so Ardura did a study for that as well.
Okay.
I just want to mention something that the EFTC Plus, the beauty of this model is it's extremely modular, so it's really easy to add or remove any of these discharges and all of that. But we have we need to define the scenarios as worst case scenario or more realistic one or optimized or optimistic one. But I just want to emphasize that it really depends on how you all want to look at that, right? Whether you want to look at if we take this amount of money, some of it is going to come back to the Bay at some point. We can easily add that as long as we have that information. So it all goes to what scenario you all want to see. And to the worst case scenario, I think the easiest way would be, okay, these are the 10 switches in the model that could be on and off. You can pick which one you want to turn it on, which one you want to turn it off, and then select whatever reasonable number of scenarios that could be run in the limited time that we have. Because there would be an infinite number of scenarios if you want to keep going on.
Well, moving these wastewater flows around will have some impact on Oso Bay and Oso Creek, but from the standpoint of discharges from the industries into the Ship Channel, that probably is not going to change very much because they're going to take the reclaimed water and as a substitute for drinking water. So the net, the discharge into the Ship Channel is not going to change much.
Yeah, Carl's right. So the whole point of the whole effluent reuse program is to offset the demand, and that those purchasers of that water, that effluent water, would then subsequently reduce their potable water demand. The entire program currently is estimated to be 16 MGD. So currently we're under contract for about 11.
So the reason I pointed that out is because the worst case scenario is actually that the Mary Roads pipeline goes down and therefore we do not have the chain feeding the wastewater treatment plants or feeding industry. And so we don't have inflows because there's no rain, and we don't have return flows because there's no water consumption on land.
And everything.
That is the
shut
worst
down,
case scenario
Mary
for
Road
salinity and
pipeline
waste
is
disposal.
running,
So if we're going to run a worst case scenario, let's run it and show everybody what it looks like.
As far as direction goes,
That would be the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I don't want to get lost in the weeds. And I think a conservative model that looks at worst-case scenarios is worth looking at, but I think just sticking to like realistic modeling for the time periods using average return flows would, I
Realism
think
is
that'd be good.
crucial.
Yeah, because I mean, if we're looking at worst-case scenario, I think no vessel mixing will be a form of a worst-case scenario, and I don't think that'll be realistic and won't, produce the information we're looking for.
You could, we haven't, I said it, but I don't know if it was heard, but if there was an event where vessels weren't going or the power plant was off, the city could turn off or turn down, I should say, the desal facility, right? So just that's the second part of the conversation, depending on the duration, obviously. And so that's something, yeah.
So when it comes to the scenarios, there are different categories, right? One is hydrology, whether you're looking at like a dry versus wet year. One is seasonality. One is like other things, and then also all these permits. So when you all want to decide like how you want to define those scenarios, they're like a combination of all these scenarios. So you can say 2011, which is a dry year, with like, I don't know, all these permits at maximum or minimum, with some seasonality. I'm going to focus on summer or whatever. And then in the other way, looking at this, like going to be 2010, which is a wet year. Like I'm going to look at the spring, I'm going to look at the permits, and this way, that way. So again, it all comes to those combination of various parameters in your, or like the modules that you want to turn on and turn off.
I mean, just to follow up, that's a great point. Is there any way you all could give us just some ballpark number of scenarios that you can realistically test in the time that you have to work? Like just, you don't have to do it now, but I'm just saying so we can think about that question.
I can give you something else. Right now, 1 year worth of scenario, like running in EFTC is going to take 33 hours. And basically extracting that data is another 3 hours. So you're looking at 1.5 days for each year of scenario, or each year of like simulation, I think. We are in the process of improving that, but it takes some time. We actually brought it down to 12 hours, but the result is a little bit different because it's dynamic time step. For those of you who are aware of that, it's a little bit different. We don't know which one is actually better than the other one. We need to compare it with observation. But let's assume that it's going to be 1.5 days for 1 year worth of simulation. So if you all want to look at like a 2-year or 3-year simulation, that is like 3 years is like 5 days, right? And between the two firms, we probably can split the work and then have it maybe like, I don't know, 2 or 3 runs or 3 or 4 runs at the same time simultaneously. And then just let's back calculate all the way to deadline that we have and see how many runs we can do.
Technically, we can do 10 model runs at once with 10 different machines, right? So we do have some flexibility in experimenting with different things. The number one thing I want to do is get the modifications to the model in and working, and then start tackling, what ultimate scenarios we want to have. So we have some time before we need to decide what those lists of scenarios are, but I will put together a list of ideas and options, and then we can move forward from that.
So if you have an outlook of short time, like we want to know the spikes happen between tidal periods, and would that have an impact on fish? And then longer term years, but the short duration one's obviously going to take you less computational time, right? You could probably run 5, 6 in a day, but you might not be able to analyze it all.
You have to spin it up, right? So you would actually generate a few, let's say 2-3 years of data, and then you can look at specific periods to look at those finer scale dynamics.
So regardless of how many days you want to look, it's basically at least 2 months of spin up in the model as well, right? So you run the model for 60 to 90 days to stabilize the model, then start running, even if you want to run it for 5 days. But also, I need to full disclosure tell you that 5 days in 2011 is completely different from 5 days in 2024, for example.
Right. The other thing is back to DO, which you guys wanted to do. Where are we with that right now in terms of, is that something we can do, or that's going to have to come later?
So DO modeling is still not part of the scope that we've agreed to.
Yeah, I think the modelers, or Jordan's comments, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but the thought was the work was going to be conducted and it would uncover any potential areas where DO might be a problem. And then that would influence decisions on further work in the future.
That's right.
And the other thing I think it's important to note is, depending on the results of this model, the designs can also be changed in the construction and the design of the seawater desal plant.
So what was interesting in that hypoxia report I referenced in my last presentation was that in the 1990s, they were starting to see expanding areas in Corpus Christi Bay of hypoxia. And you got three elements: nutrients, temperature, salinity. And so obviously scientifically it'd be very interesting to have an all-inclusive model to understand that. And so I think it would be valuable to do that if we care about tourism and fisheries. But I was just looking for an outlook there. If it's not in the scope, obviously, to get this done with these first results, how can we follow? Do you have an idea how long it will take to put that together?
Well, are you asking how long it would take to put together the next scope of what could be done, or to actually do it?
Do it.
To do it. Well, I mean, we had a proposal that was 12 to 18 months, I believe, to do the phase of DO modeling.
And $500,000.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, there's no doubt.
Well, I
It's
think
a more extensive
we can
effort.
try to at least get a first approximation to DO based on that report. Because there were a range of temperature and salinity conditions that were conducive
Yes.
to hypoxia, right? And we can identify periods in the model when you have that range of temperature and salinity near the bottom, or the gradient over the water column, which is why I was asking about the density structure of the water column.
Yeah, that's right.
So we won't know DO, but we could say, oh, under these conditions, it is possible to have DO, and how prevalent are those conditions based on your modeling?
Exactly.
And also perhaps make some conjecture as to how that hypoxia might expand based upon this model or contract.
So in 2011, Ben Hodges and myself and another one of his grad students graduated at that time, but anyway, we did that study on Oso Bay and the water flowing out of Oso Bay and along the bottom as a density underflow, and we measured hypoxia, right, as a result of it, and we could see that zone of hypoxia expanding outward on the different tidal cycles. So we know we can observe that phenomena existing and occurring naturally. We were also able to build an EFDC plus model of that system, but that model itself was very, very fine resolution in the vertical grid scale as well as horizontal, much finer than we've got here. And if we tried to do it at that fine resolution across the entire bay system, the model would take forever to run. I mean, so we're running into logistics things there, but if we identified an area and then we wanted to model that no further, then you're talking about building a smaller submodel, which again is possible. Anything is possible. We can dream it, we can do it, but how much do you want to do?
In the proposal that we put together, there are like one crucial first step that needs to be done anyway, and that's like looking at the historical data, looking at that report, do some statistical analysis, looking at different indices to kind of identify the, let's call it hotspot with regard to DO. And then the next phase could be, okay, let's do some just limited modeling the way that Jordan described, because DO is the biggest beast when it comes to modeling. It's like there are so many variables that impact DO that if you want to have it right, it's a lot of work. And then if you want to go like in a large area, the level of uncertainty becomes bigger and bigger and bigger because you don't have enough data to put in the model. So there is one approach of looking at like, okay, there are 5 areas that I'm going to build like a very selected model for that area, look at that. Or you can go like a big, gigantic model that covers everywhere and then go like a full extent of the domain and do the DO modeling. So the proposal has like the first step, then like the limited modeling versus the full modeling that we put together.
Well, I guess I would think that from, concise, from trying to trim that down, that Nueces Bay is your extreme condition. And so taking the area around the power plant outflow into Nueces Bay would be of interest. I think the ship channel itself, Inner Harbor, isn't where we do a lot of fishing. And we might kill some fish in there, but I think the greater interest might be, I'm just suggesting, would be Nueces Bay for that. But yeah, it sounds like it's beyond the scope of getting this thing done in April. This is another 12, 18 months afterwards. So maybe
We've spent a bunch of time talking about the ship channel and the transfer from the ship channel into Nueces Bay. Jason asked a question in his series of questions. How are we handling the outlet at the sparger of the desalination facility? How are you modeling the mixing and the effectiveness of that? What's the input at that point?
So like the diffuser setup questions? Yeah, I was wondering like how is the diffuser going to be set up in the model for the Inner Harbor plant and how that would be different from an open pipe outfall? I think there's 8 diffuser ports for the Inner Harbor, and the reason I ask is because Perth is a really similar facility, and that has 40 diffuser ports, and they got a dilution of like down to like 1 to 40 or 1 to 50 within a pretty close distance.
Yeah, Jason, we don't, with the new designer, I don't think we know how many diffusers there are in this new design. They showed us everything above ground in that presentation they gave.
We can start with what is there because that's what's passed muster with the TCEQ. Maybe make it better, but it's got to at least be equivalent or better to the current design because that's
I don't know
what
if we should, do we show TCEQ design to the diffuser?
That was in the original permit application.
Yeah.
My understanding from our last meeting was that
but anyway.
that the brine discharges isn't, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, it's in like a water parcel. You're not doing near field modeling, right? You're just putting that volume into one layer and one block.
In
of
one
your
cell,
volume.
yes.
In
We
one
can, we can
cell.
put it in multiple layers if you want to, but it's in one cell.
Correct.
So this is far field modeling. We are not going to do any type of near field. So we assume that the total discharge of the specific salinity is going to be discharged into one cell. That cell is the mixing zone, basically. It's going to just assume immediate mixture and then calculate the concentration and the volume, and then it start like, doing the hydrodynamics.
So
from there.
every surface on that cell will have identical properties.
Can you repeat that?
Well, each cell has 6 surfaces, right?
You mean layers?
No, each cell has 6 surfaces. 4 around the side, top and bottom.
Correct.
And
If you
I
look at the
hear you
layer, yes.
saying that the composition
Yes.
on all of those surfaces is identical.
Correct.
So the model is gonna take the discharge that we're putting in, and it puts in that discharge, it discharges to a specific cell for which we know the volume, and we know the mass of salt that's going into that cell, we know the momentum of the discharge going into that cell, that drives mixing from that cell to the adjacent cells. All of that gets interplayed, right? And so with the smaller resolution that we're gonna have in there, you're doing less initial mixing in just by putting it into the one cell, because the cell itself is smaller. But then you're doing the mixing routines that are in the algorithms for the model that's gonna spread some of that salt to the adjacent cells right away. So it's not, we're not doing the jet plume models that you do in the near field mixing with core mix and other things. We're doing a more numerical mixing into a cell, but then spreading with the currents and everything else. That's what far field modeling is. Yeah.
So functionally, would it be different from an open pipe outfall, like a facility with that?
There's no difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will there be like a short write-up in like y'all's report about how y'all kind of did that and maybe
We should include all the assumptions in the.
There's a lot of
I think you
turbulence
just
at
asked for
that
that
point.
write-up, so yes, there will be that write-up.
Cool.
The there's a lot of turbulence at that point. It's not just the material coming out of the decel, there's a whole lot more water that's going into the mix.
So that's what Jordan said. The model can't, can count for that momentum that is generated by that flow injection in that cell. So it's gonna be like just assume like it's like a hose or pipeline that is just spreading water. So the water is gonna go everywhere basically, and then move the other water molecules around it basically.
But the diffuser also induces water. It's not just a single point. Water is induced for the mixing.
I don't think that we are counting for that.
Not at this scale,
No.
of the grid scale, no. I mean,
Well, then your concentrations aren't going to be right.
well, not right adjacent to the physical diffuser, no, but on the larger scale that we're modeling, they're gonna be reasonably accurate.
Because the size of that cell is around 100 meters by, I don't know, 10, 15 meters?
30.
30, yeah. So you're looking at like 100 by 30 meter area that this model is gonna assume the single concentration in that cell.
I mean, if you really wanted to do a far field model, but also capture all of the CFDs, computational fluid dynamics, additive viscosity, turbulent closure, all sorts of that stuff, you need a grid scale that's ridiculously small and couldn't be functional on any of these computers.
Doesn't make a difference with finite element. They still need that level of mesh.
Yeah, it still needs to be small, but.
The only difference is the speed of running, basically. And then also when you go to finite element, then you don't conserve mass, then you have another problem over there that you need to deal with. So mixing far field with near field is really, 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 really hard. It could be done for like a smaller scale if you're looking at like 1 mile of like, a stream or like a lake, but you cannot do it for like some system like this that is like hundreds of miles width and like, lengths.
You can't do it for getting the council some information on the 28th. So.
Yeah, I think within the scope of what we're doing, it's a point that we just have to live with and move on. That we're not going to be a fine diffuser exact in that area.
Just wanna kind of like I'm like Jordan. I really like to use some moments for teaching education. Any numerical model has the worst quality of results around the boundary conditions, right? So that's kind of like the same thing, that this is your boundary condition that you're introducing something new to the model. So your worst reliable response is at that point exactly. So that's like a singularity point in your model that you have the worst results.
So we have 10 more minutes remaining to this committee meeting. Is there any additional question that you would like to share out to Jordan and Amin or team that is online?
Can you just recap what is your list of priorities in terms of the timescale? So are you going to do 2010, 2011 because it had a different bathymetry, or you are updating the bathymetry to what it's now, present day, and using more current data to force and validate the model?
So my opinion is the model itself is already validated for 2010, 2011. So I'm confident that the model, as computationally developed, is capable of reproducing conditions we saw then. So I'm already moving away from the idea that we need to further validate this model. We can go in and change the bathymetry and simulate 2024 or 2025 conditions if we have those conditions, which is what Amin and his group are trying to get for us to build in this model. But we're not necessarily, we're not trying to match with any revised model. We're not trying to match observed data better. I'm good with it already. So what I want to do then is use this model to simulate the proposed discharge and intake and see what it tells us.
With all due respect, I think that's falling short of what we need to be doing, because we do need to be validating the model, and you have to show us that the model is working properly for current conditions. So, I mean, I'm not doubting that you validated it for 2010, 2011, but if the bathymetry has changed and you update the bathymetry, you have to show some validation of that model so that then we can look at all the other conditions.
So what data would you like us to compare to?
Well, I was suggesting some of them. I mean, sea level is one of your drivers. There's sea level data for the Aransas ship channel, or sea level data around the bay system for more recent data.
Okay.
You know, there's using wind speeds from stations that are closer to the bay rather than using airport wind speeds when you're forcing the model. So it doesn't have to be very complicated, or, you know, but it does, we do need to have a validation of the model. Otherwise, whatever we say about the model results are going to be placed in doubt, because we're not showing, okay, the model is robust, you know, it's reasonable in what it's predicting with the basic parameters. There are a few stations with temperature and salinities. Well, let's look at how well the model does, you know, because otherwise we're all going to be treading on very uncertain ground.
So your point is totally valid. I just want to just bring this up to your attention. Every model you know that is obsolete the moment that we create that, right? Because the system is dynamic and it changes. Just think about what is the whole goal of this modeling, because if you're trying to mimic the observation at the time that like you're modeling, that's a different goal from you want to look at the impact of this desalination unit on the water body. No, I'm not saying that you should not validate that. What I'm saying is 2011, that's the input for this model. Then 2017, we had Harvey, the bathymetry completely changed. From there, there is another change right now. So the idea is, if you want to do the validation, what year you want to do the validation and what year we should pick as the model to be validated. If you want to validate the model for the existing condition that is right now, then you cannot run that model for 2011, because that's not the same situation.
That is exactly my point.
So then basically, what's the whole point of gathering information from 2011 to 2025 when we just want to focus on 2024 and 2025?
Maybe that is what you should be focusing on, because that's the most realistic conditions now with the bathymetry. So maybe then trying to rerun what you had that worked for 2010, 2011 for the area you were interested then, put more effort into what data is available for, I don't know, 2004, 2024, 2025. We're in drought conditions, we have a different bathymetry, and this is when, you know, the plant would start to get built, and probably some of the worst conditions that you can have a desalination plant with very high salinity and drought.
So then how
why
are you
are we
going
going back to 2010, 2011 with a different system?
So then how are you going to synthesize that hydrology of a drought year into your model? If the 2024 and 2025 is not a drought year, how are you going to implement the 2011 condition to a 24-25 condition? And then how are you going to make sure that that's a correct answer?
Well, I don't think we need to. I think if we want to simulate and revalidate the model as a 2024 capable simulating model, I like that approach, because we have data from Freeze and Nichols that gives us measured velocity data in the inner harbor, right? That then becomes, can the model reproduce that data? If it can, then we can say it's doing all right, at least in that area, and that gives us the specific assessment of what's likely to happen with the proposed discharge in that area. That's where I guess that's what we should focus on. That's what I would propose we do, is make sure we can get 2024, assuming that we have tidal forcing and other data available for that time. Set that model up, run that to compare the
Without changing bathymetry?
What?
Without changing bathymetry or with changing bathymetry?
Oh, we're going to need to change the bathymetry. Okay. That much is clear already with the
So
redrafting.
you're suggesting that basically we have a validated model for 10 and 11, let's make some changes to the input file and make it 2024, 2025, run that model, compare it against the ground truth data, and if the model performs well, then we're good.
Yeah.
But what if it doesn't?
You better.
Then I quit. I mean, you know, I can't answer that question. We keep trying to get it better. That's it.
Yeah.
You know?
You need to be very careful with those years, because that's the period where the ship channel was being dredged in the inner harbor. So bathymetry is.
They were dredging it
different
when they
this
were
month
collecting the
than last
velocity
month.
data.
No, I'm just saying that was the active period where they were doing the dredging.
So dredging what happened in 2024 and 2025, right?
Well, it's in that recent time frame.
Correct.
It was completed nominally
Yeah.
a year ago, but it was active in that time
Yeah,
frame.
the latest bathymetry on that newest Bay area, at least, is 2023. The Texas, the former tenders collected, that's 2023. But if there's a changes to that, well, Army Corps should have annual like bathymetry for the channel, but not beyond channels. So where they actually dump those drainage material, it's not going to be collected in any of the bathymetry that we have.
But I think the Corps of Engineers and the contractor that were doing the dredging, they kept track of what they were doing as they moved along the ship channel. So some of the transitory information must be there.
Okay.
Can I comment? This is Kirsten Stansel online. This is the information that I thought I tried to send you, Jordan, the bathymetry data that I have a lot of the as-builts that the Corps collected after the dredge material was placed in the bay. So I thought I provided all that information to y'all.
Fantastic. I will get with you if I don't have it, and we will make sure it
Okay.
gets in there. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah.
What about the breadth of salinity data during these 2 years? Do we have two broad data set for that same period versus 2010, 2011?
We'll be able to answer that question pretty soon.
I think that there are.
There should be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In some areas at least, maybe not the Inner Harbor, but in some areas that you could compare.
Yeah.
Was that a question about the dredge placement? I can't hear. I didn't hear the question online.
I'm sorry, I just asked about the breadth of salinity data during those 2 periods in terms of, using as the best input deck to work from. And I guess
I mean,
we're gonna,
we
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, our station in Nueces Delta has been active during all of these time periods that we're discussing, and so is the station in Nueces Bay, so.
Good.
The buoy that was installed would have been by the Texas Water Development Board would have been around that same time as well. I'm not sure if it was in, I think it should have been in before 2020. I think it would have been 2025 for sure, maybe probably 2024 as well.
Okay. Jordan, I do have one question related to the data validation that Dr. Sharon suggested. Would your proposal fall within the near timeline that you have right now to work on? Would that be possible?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Again, thanks for all the input and the comments. I'm loving this project. It's going to be so much fun to keep doing, and I'll be working on it tonight when I get home, because this is what's driving me this next month. I'm excited about it. So we've promised a lot. We're going to deliver it, and let's whenever we have the next meeting, I'll show you more interesting stuff.
Nick, when is
what's
our next
our
meeting?
date of our next meeting? Do we have that pinned down yet?
TBD.
Can you speak? We can't in the microphone?
I wasn't sure whether or not we wanted another meeting before it goes to council, to city
Yes,
council.
we need 1 or 2 more at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, for next, I mean, you'll have, what's the next material that you would show this group?
We got to start showing the 2024 results, really.
Your model, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
you're gonna show your model.
Show the model, but set up for 2024 with the revised bathymetry and see how well it does against the velocity and salinity data that's available for
Including the
validation.
the ship stuff you showed today.
We'll have some of that, yep.
And then do you need 3 or 6 hours more time with this group? Or 3 is, do you need 2 meetings or 1? I would think 2 at least, but.
Well, if we do 2 weeks from now, and then after that is right for the council, so I only think there's one meeting that we can do, where I can show you things and get feedback and make adjustments as needed.
Okay, we can plan for 1 to start. For the committee here, just because you'll hear you have heard and you may see it in the news, the mayor is going to have a special meeting next week for the Inner Harbor Desalination Project We're still waiting on what exactly that, what the agenda's going to look like. And so it was going to be for Thursday, but one of our council members' dad passed away, so there's a funeral Thursday. So it looks like it's going to be Friday, the special council meeting. I'm not sure if it's a workshop or a council meeting for a vote. But the mayor is aware, as is the full council, that we wanted some far-field reporting before they took a vote. But you've seen what the mayor has put out, so we'll see. We'll get more information, I think, before Friday. Just want to make sure you're all aware. Also, in April, there's 3 council meetings, and I have to recommend this to city council to make sure they're okay with it. But the plan that we want to roll out to them for the level 1 water emergency work that we've started with them this week is have the first meeting, a council meeting, the first Tuesday, that there'll be a council meeting, not next Tuesday, but the following week. Then that middle meeting would be a workshop of the council, so it won't be a council meeting, a good 4 or 5 hour workshop on level 1 water emergency planning. And then the next and final Tuesday of the month would be a council meeting, because I had requested with the council that that last meeting would be a workshop. But we're realizing with our first workshop, we need more time with the council to go over material before they vote on anything. So that's the event for April. And the timeline, the goal was the end of April. If we need to take it to the first council meeting in May, I have no problem with that. If we're taking the recommendation on the far-field modeling, I don't see an issue with.
Yeah, my thought is maybe we schedule a meeting on the 17th and the 24th. Or 23rd, you want to do 17th and 23rd? Yeah, I'm looking at Jordan just to make sure. I think if we don't, that gives him 2 weeks to get hopefully a lot of work done. And then we present, he gives us information on the 17th, and then you all will have a lot of comments, and then he can follow that back up.
We come back on the 24th?
I'll just say Mike and I can't make it on the 17th.
On the 17th you can?
Well, we could do the 16th, which is the Thursday.
Good.
Is the whole goal to have something, the mayor's meeting is a week from today, is that correct?
That's,
The
yeah,
vote,
that's,
per se?
well, I'm not 100% for sure, but yes.
Okay.
That's what I've been, that's what it seems like.
So we're having meetings after the vote per se. I mean, I understand the mayor's.
That's why
mayor thing.
right, yeah.
But the bigger question, I think, is for the modelers. How much time do you need so that we can talk about some of the results that you might have? 2 weeks seems like a short amount of time to me, but I don't really have a feel for it. Like incorporating bathymetry, finding the data that you want to use to validate and drive the model. Is 2 weeks enough to have some results?
It's what we do, and if that's what we're directed to do, we gotta do it. So, yeah, we can be doing it.
Okay.
If the 17th doesn't work for you, I could do whatever that Monday is, after the 17th.
The 20th? You could, but we were trying to do one on the 24th as well. I guess you could do the 20th and the 24th.
I do know the 24th is the Water Conservation Committee meeting. So
It's a little tough then on that one.
16
Okay.
and 23.
Well, why don't let's pull there's several members that aren't here at this point because we're past our time of ending, but maybe we can poll the committee to see what's most favorable. There's always going to be 1 or 2 that can't make it. And I think the goal is to at least have 2 more meetings with this committee.
One thing I want to interject is that these folks take the results of the modeling, right? And you've been reaching out to some other scientists as well. So in terms of just putting it out there in the public and so forth, I think this is a real critical part. So in the timing of things, how much time do you need to take the results and confer with your other academic experts?
We have a meeting scheduled for the 17th with our colleagues to start the process. It might take more than 1 meeting to talk to them, and we want to do it, in a conceptual way, not necessarily this is what the model says, because the model is going to be a process, right? But to think about the actual values, for example, that could be causing problems, or conditions that could be causing problems. So we're working in parallel, basically, so that we have hopefully a consensus stance on conditions that could be problematic.
Yeah, I just want to get, you need some time to review that with
Yes.
others. It's not going to be, you give it to us, we're going to sit down in a 3-hour period, and you're going to render some analysis while we're sitting here. You're going to need some time.
Okay, well, the goal is, again, to the 20, let me just get my calendar here. The goal is to take something to council on the 20,
That's all I want.
the goal is to take something to city council on the 28th, but we did say April or May, right? So we don't have to be boxed into that 28th. So if we have to present something to council on the 5th of May, or even the next meeting, the 12th, that's okay. Okay, so let's just take it one step at a time. What we'll do is find out when we can have at least 2 meetings and get those scheduled in, and then we'll go from there. This has been some of the better work I think we've done in this city. I'm glad we're doing this. So these committee meetings are real beneficial. You can tell this group's engaged. And what Ferdinand says, we always like employees or consultants that love what they do, because it makes a big difference. When you have somebody saying, I'm going to go home and keep working, we like signing those people up all day. So, right. Thank you.